I'm
Good
live.
morning.
This is cool. I'm live. I'm whispering.
1, 2.
I can be louder.
We can talk now.
Yeah,
I can project. I'm an actor.
there you go. That just means you can wait tables anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
All right, good morning. Hope everyone's having a good time so far. We had a great time last night. I'm not going to spend too much time on just gushing over introductions. The man to my immediate right, last time I saw him, we were in Atlanta. It actually was a convention with JG, and we hung out watching Lakers games and stuff like that, and it was a lot of fun. I first became aware of his work from Highlander as what I thought was probably one of the most quintessential villains that show. The fact that they killed him off, I would have loved to have seen him come back to do more stuff, because the layers you had in that character were just amazing. And Werner Stocker, geez, what a great guy. But watched him first in Highlander and then saw a lot of his subsequent work. Watched him through all his incarnations in Star Trek, and each time I'm just astounded and amazed by the level of detail and talent he gives to his parts. So let's give it up this morning for Mr. James Horan.
Thank you. Thank you. Is this on? Am I talking?
Can it be louder?
Can you hear me all right?
Can it be louder?
All right. So
We're going to set up this morning. We're going to let James talk a little bit, and then you guys can open up for questions. I'll kind of interview him as well. So anytime you have a question, just pop it out there and raise your hand, and we'll get to that as well.
let me talk a little bit.
Go ahead.
I talk for a living. That's what I tell my wife. I talk for a living. These days I'm mainly doing voiceover and doing on-camera commercials. I have a Geico spot that's running now where I'm playing racquetball and getting crushed by a wall, maybe. And my line is, no son, Geico crushed it. Made some nice bills on that, but it's still going, thank God. But no, it's like I tell people for many years I just played bad guys. Because, go figure, I guess with my angularity in my voice, they thought you're the bad guy of the week. And in prime time, not just Trek, they let me be a human once, right? And I was Lieutenant Barnaby in Next Gen. Mm-hmm. But most of the other times I was an alien, not so nice aliens. And that's fine, but I tell you, since I have a son who's going to be 11 in August, and I was starting late as a papa, I admit it, but man, that kid is just my heart. And when he came along, I just wanted to be goofy. So my wife said that was okay with her too. So I don't play bad guys anymore, except I do voices. So in video games, I've been a few bad guys. I'm the main bad guy in Metal Gear Solid. I'm a character named Skullface. If any of you play Metal Gear Solid, I don't play video games, but
my wife was playing that actually not long ago, and I walked into the room and I was just like, God, that voice sounds familiar. And I looked at the credits, so I was like, it's James, okay, So
I've done over 80 video games. And again, it's like somebody was looking at this morning. Oh, you do that, you do that, you do that. And I say, yeah, well, I do them and I forget them because if somebody plays it for me, I say, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Now, when you do villain, or when you've done villainous roles, do you approach it just simply as a villainous role, or do you find the redeeming quality, the self-redeeming quality that every villain seems to think they're right?
Well, it's just you look at it as a human being. So that to me is what we do as actors, as we study human behavior. That's why people have always fascinated me as to where they're from, where they come from, why they are the way they are. And that's why I say it's my business. People are my business. This making eye contact with people is kind of unusual. A lot of people are uncomfortable with that. But it's just I just think villains are definitely who they are. They were shaped that way. They became that way. You mentioned Grayson in Highlander. He's supposed to be 4,000 years old or something. So you probably get bored in the. Oh well, can't die. He's an immortal, for crying out loud.
Had tuna fish last week for lunch. Now
I'm going to have it again.
And 3,000 years ago I had it.
So, they have a wry sort of I mean, what I liked about him was, he was like a wry sort of sense of humor about stuff. He said, "Oh, you're only 2,000 years old, but let's have a fight and see what we do."
But he was the villain. But the way you played it, I didn't get the impression that he felt like he was on a crusade. He thought that he was right in what he was doing. And the
Yeah,
crowd was
exactly.
saying as well.
But most villains, from Richard III on down, it's like they have justifications for what they do, unless they're just absolutely crazy, and just homicidal maniacs.
That was the one to it about
those aren't
discontent.
necessarily interesting
Yeah.
to play, but the ones that have layers is
Right.
certainly interesting to play, and studying their background. As you're taught to do as an actor anyway, as you learn the history of a character. To play anyone, you have to know who they are and where they came from. So
No, what is your background? How did you get started? Where, going way, way back?
way back in the Wayback Machine, Mr.
Yeah.
Peabody. Anybody know where that's from?
Yeah.
Look at that.
All right. Anybody know where that's from who didn't watch the movie that came out a few years ago? Anybody?
Hey.
Okay. All right. So there's a couple. All right. Great.
No, I grew up with the animated thing.
Fractured Fairy Tales.
Yep.
Yeah.
But no, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, not too far away, and I was born and raised there, right across from Churchill Downs. And I was raised by my mother. God rest her soul. My dad died when I was 3, and I'm the youngest. And I just I don't know. I got into sports when I was young. I played football. I ran track in high school, and then I did also a couple years college, small college. There's a small college called Center College in Danville, Kentucky. And it wasn't, I don't know, in the back of my head, I always admired actors, I suppose, but I never envisioned myself acting. It wasn't until I was 19 I did my first play in college. I was an English major, just because my idea was to become an English teacher, because I had one of my mentors was my English instructor in high school, who became like a father figure to me too. He was my track coach, my German coach, my German teacher, and my English teacher for 3 years at a high school. And he was actually at my wedding 12 years ago, and he's passed since. But he was, I was fortunate enough to have some really powerful father figures who were mentors in my life, because not having had a father, I sought that out. But he was important to me. And one of the things that he did, in his English lit class, everybody feared his English lit class in senior year in high school, because you had to learn the prologue to the Canterbury Tales in Middle English, and stand up in front of the class and do it. And I can still do it. You want to hear a little bit?
I know part of it, but yeah.
Wander April with his sjurisota, the drukt of Marsh hath pierced to the rota, and bathed every vein in swish liquor, of which thereto engendered is the floor. One Zephyrus ache with his sweeter breath, in spirit hearth and every holt and hath. The tender cropis and the younger sonna hath in the ram his halfa course irana. That's English, believe it or not.
That's
Thank you.
it's almost Welsh, isn't
Huh?
it? It's almost Welsh, isn't it?
Well, it's Geoffrey Chaucer
Yeah.
was writing in the 1400s
Right.
and in England, and that was the prologue to
Give
the.
it-
He wrote all the Canterbury Tales, but
Wow.
he made us learn this prologue.
Wow.
And it was, every year people knew that you had to learn that, and you have to get up in front of the class and do it. And I just loved I loved the words, I think that's where I learned that I fell in love with words, because, in poems too, it's like I always loved the sound of
Right.
poems, and I've only been in a couple of Shakespeare plays, but Shakespeare to me is amazing too. Even sonnets, I know some of the sonnets. I'll bore you with those later. But it's something I do. I have a little. Where I live in the North San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, and I bought a house up there about 15 years ago, and I converted like an old shed I had in front of my house, which is on the street, and I see more horses than cars there some days. So this is what I like about it. I got a little stream behind the house. It's kind of country living, but people walk the dogs, and people walk. It's a neighborhood. We say hello and stuff. But I made it into a little pub out there. So at night we sit out there most nights, my wife and I, and we just, people come by, we invite them in. Hey, come have a drink. The Guinness is flowing, shall we say? And
Knock a few back.
as a good Irishman. But when we're into our cups a little bit, I always ask somebody, do a poem for me. Do a poem, and it's like, I don't know any poems. I said, sure you do. You know a poem. You know Mary Had a Little Lamb. Just do it. You know song lyrics. It's
Sing
like,
for your supper.
well, it's like, yeah. Somebody years ago, they had a birthday party, and they didn't want it. They told people, I don't want any presents, but you have to do a poem for me. They said, you owe me a poem. That was it. You owe me a poem. And so people had to, instead of presents, they stood up and had to do a poem. You could read it. You didn't have to necessarily know it. But like I was talking to somebody last night, and I just, I love words, and I think that's where it's always, and then when I was 19, getting back to that story, they were auditioning for this college players they were doing Marat Sade, which
Ooh.
is Jean-Paul Marat and the Marquis de Sade. It was a famous play. I don't know if it's not, but it was done in New York, it was done in London back in, this was the 70s we're talking about. And I auditioned for the Marquis de Sade, and I got cast as the Marquis de Sade. My baptism by fire, I like to call it. And the bad guys just came ever since. But man, the bug bit me hard, and I went, wow, I dig this. I like being on stage. I like performing. So, and then I just started doing plays from there, and I finished college, and I'd done a couple of plays there, and I had an English degree. And I was certified to teach high school English, which is what I envisioned myself doing. But I decided to go and explore acting a little more, so I got an MFA in acting at the University of Iowa. That was a 2-year program. It was kind of a conservatory approach. I mean, Juilliard and Yale, they're the famous acting training in this country, but I felt like this program that I was in was quite comparable. We had great teachers. I mean, it was voice, movement, dance, singing. It was like, a conservatory approach. And so I felt like I learned a lot in those 2 years. But after 2 Iowa winters, I was ready to leave. And so, yeah. I was talking to somebody about Winnipeg this morning. Anybody ever been to Winnipeg in the winter?
Oh.
Oy, it's very similar.
You show up for one day and stay for 8 months because
Yep.
you can't get out.
But I graduated with the MFA, and I went back to Kentucky for a little while, and then I just, what am I going to do? I didn't know anybody. As an actor, you go to New York or LA usually in this country. Although now Atlanta is like a big place to be, right? I mean, they're shooting a lot of stuff here, I've heard. But that was the choice. I didn't know anybody in New York. I knew one guy in LA that I'd gone to school with in Iowa, and so I came to LA, and I kind of hung my shingle out there.
Well,
And that's where I started.
I teach theater now for a living, and
There you go.
as of Monday, they're going to be introduced to Chaucer now. So expect a bunch of emails to come to you.
Force them to learn that
There you go.
prologue.
I'm going to make them do the prologues.
There
I
you go.
never even thought about it, but it's like, yeah, guess what, guys? It's a whole other level now. So you may get a bunch of emails from my students
There you are.
thanking
Man,
thanking you
thanks.
with various 4-letter epithets. But
Yeah. What level do you teach?
high school.
Oh, wow.
I did middle school for 11 years, and then I've now transitioned over to a high school, and
Cool.
it's night and day. I mean, the theater needs all kinds of work, but I've been kicking on every door in the
It's
county.
here in town?
No, come North Carolina.
Oh,
So yeah, I come down from here. So
Nice.
we got to get you to Charlotte now.
There we go.
But all right, so let's walk into your first big part. What turned the key for you?
Well, I got into a theater company almost as soon as I got out to LA, a very good theater company, and just started with sci-fi. They had done the year before, I think about it now, man, I've been in sci-fi my whole life. The year before I got there, they had done, you guys know who Ray Bradbury is,
Oh
right?
yeah.
They had done his Martian Chronicles on stage. And it was they started at the small theater where they were over by Dodger Stadium. They had a small theater there, it was an old vaudeville house, which is a lovely little theater. I don't think it's there anymore. And they had actually moved it to a larger theater on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, and it was a big moneymaker for them, this Martian Chronicles on stage. And then, so the year I got there, they were doing Fahrenheit 451 on stage.
Good stuff.
And Ray was around, and I got to meet him and hang out with him. Great guy, goofy as hell. He never drove a car. Believe it or not, this guy that wrote all these science fi novels, he was driven everywhere all his whole life. He was like a big kid. Sweet man. But my first role in L.A. was I was a walk-on in Fahrenheit 451. I played a paramedic who comes in and Montag's wife had overdosed or something, and we had to pump her stomach out. And I was like, yeah, okay, bye. My 2 lines on stage. And but I got to hang. Oh, and Robert O'Reilly. Hello, you know that name?
Bob, yeah.
He was Montag. He
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he played the lead. So that's how long I've known Bob O'Reilly. I met JG a little later, but we worked together too. We have the stories just come. Tell me if I bore you. But yeah, that was my first role, and then after that, I did a couple of more plays. They did The Grapes of Wrath on stage. I mean, they did amazing. It was an amazing company. It was called The Colony. It's still in Los Angeles. It's now in Burbank. It's called The Colony Theater. And after that, I just actually the first television thing, big television. I mean, my first role was on The Dukes of Hazzard. I got beaten up by who's the blonde?
John Schneider.
John Schneider, yeah, got beaten up by him, and the Dukes of Hazzard. Yeah,
Bring John in now and see how he does.
I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
Any questions from the audience while we're
please,
at a point?
anytime.
Okay. Yep.
There we are.
Is it true that bad guys have more fun?
Bad guys have more fun. Well, you know, it certainly there's a deliciousness sometimes to being bad, because all of us think, what you'd like to do to somebody when they cut you off in traffic or whatever. So and these guys just follow through on it.
My father always did tell me when I was training, he was like, playing the villain, it's easy to be an SOB. You just got to be yourself. On a bad day or something. Just everyone can go to that dark spot. It's trying to be that. I toured doing Jekyll and Hyde, and doing Dr. Jekyll was the harder part of those two.
Wow.
Singing through it, because that's
you did it.
Yeah, oh. and I was just like, it's easy to play that villainous, murderous, side of him, but to play that intelligent and to balance the dichotomy between characters.
Well, look at Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad. I mean, I've never met him, but I hear he's like a sweetheart of a man.
Now he's doing Power Rangers.
Yeah. I mean, he's a great actor with a huge range. But I mean, what he became in Breaking Bad, I only seen. My wife, binge watched it. I surfed into parts of it. I've never seen the whole thing, but I've seen that transition that he did. I am the one who knocks, right? Oh. Wow. So anyway, yeah, there certainly is a side that you can relish, and yet there's hopefully you don't go there. Yeah.
And then I guess Highlander was I guess your, I wouldn't say breakout role, but it was the one that probably got you your earliest or largest amount of early notoriety.
Well, my first big thing, just to continue there, when there used to be soap operas, and now there's only 3. There used to be 13. Mm-hmm. I was pretty well known in soaps. I don't know if anybody watched All My Children. And, I did. My longest one was on Loving. That was a half-hour ABC soap. I was on there for 2.5 years. We're talking early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I did All My Children, Another World. I did the old Edge of Night before they took that off.
Now you're dating yourself.
Well, once you were known in that world, it's almost like the Trek world. And once they know you can have that schmutz on your face and not cry about it, they hired me over and over to get the schmutz on my face again. But it was like soaps too. It was a great training ground, because that was my first actually paid gig, kind of paid gig. Was our longest paid gig was I did Another World was my first soap opera. Wow. They shot it at the NBC studios in New York. Mm-hmm. And that show was called the Cadillac of the Soaps, because they had really great actors on there, people who do like Broadway at night, and they did the daytime during the day. Mm-hmm. So I got to hang out and learn from it was a great training ground for a young actor.
Anthony Montgomery, I think, is on General Hospital right now.
Yeah. And there's still people I knew in soaps that are still on. There's General Hospital. Yeah. General Hospital, Days of Our Lives, and Young and the Restless are the only three that are left. I did General Hospital for a little while, 85, 86. But like I said, Loving was the longest. Randolph Mantooth, do you know that name from Emergency? Worked with him on Loving, sweet man. I've been blessed. I've worked with some really great people over the years. But anyway, soaps were very good to me, and I developed sort of a name in soaps. And then, when I came back out to LA, I guess in '92 I came to LA. And '92 was like the year I I did Zorro in Spain with JG. That's when I first met him. I talk about a bad guy.
Yeah.
I was like Zorro's evil twin brother.
Yeah. Just watched that this past
Did
week.
you?
I sat home, pulled it out, and I was like,
Duncan Regehr
Yeah.
played Zorro. I don't know how big it was in this country. That wasn't.
It,
huge,
it,
right?
it didn't do well in first run, then it came back on like ABC Family or something like that, you know.
Yeah,
And it
I mean,
ran.
I'd never heard of it, but I auditioned, and they said, "Can you ride a horse?" I said, "They don't let you out of Kentucky unless you can ride a horse." So, but little did I know, man, when they get you on those Spanish horses, we were shooting in Madrid, Spain. I was there for a month. It was great. But man, those horses are spirited animals in Spain. So I mean, but you know, got to wear the costumes and the whole thing. And JG played the alcalde. He was the mayor of the town, and he had a great role.
He did.
That was when I first met him. And this is a funny story because I was the emissary from Spain who came, and you know, you find out in the course of the thing that he's Zorro's twin brother that was separated at birth, and he comes back sort of as a Terminator to kill Zorro.
Right.
They have this big duel. But my second in command, my emissary guy with me, was Daniel Craig, and you've heard that name?
Bond.
He was fresh out of
James
drama
Bond.
school. He was like 22 years
Yeah.
old or something, sweet as could be. You know, we hung out in Spain. We went to the museums together and drank together and swapped lives, I'm sure. And I would tell somebody the other night, I've never run across him again, but I'd love to just meet him socially. You remember?
One of the great things about interviewing, people who are celebrities of a know, just the comments they throw out. I hung out with Dan Craig in Spain. Had lunch. No big deal.
Yeah,
Love it.
well, because you don't think about it at the time, and then later you see what they become. And I'm certainly happy for him. He's done well. And then later, there's another funny story about John, because that was in '92, and then I did some other things Trek-wise, and I started in the '90s. I did Next Gen, and then when I got on Deep Space Nine, my makeup call was 3 a.m. for a 7 a.m. set call, right? And I thought, really? That'll take that long? It was like, because I didn't know what the Jem'Hadar were.
Yeah.
But man, it's like I get there at 3 a.m. and it's like putting this schmutz on your face. And because they glue it right up to your lips, and
Right.
you've heard these guys say, and you see the pictures, and
Right.
it was a state-of-the-art foam that this Michael Westmore, the makeup man, he was from a makeup family in Los Angeles. He was amazing. He just had a book of lizards that he would go through and figure out lizardy looks for these aliens. And of course, you look at him. I mean, even the character I did on Next Gen, the Joe Brill, the Takaran character, which had never been seen before or since, I guess. But they are very lizard-like. Anyway, he patented this foam stuff. I mean, it was almost like skin to touch. It was amazing.
The dragon skin,
Yeah, but when I was on the set that day, I didn't know John was in the show. I mean, I've forgotten the name of the episode that we were in together, but he was a captive on the Jem'Hadar planet, right?
Right.
In fact, my character took his eye out. I don't know how many of you know that little trivia. It was he who took the eye out. I played a character named Ikatika, and he was the lead of the Jem'Hadar leader of this little penal colony, I guess, where he had these guys. And they've been waiting for a Klingon, I guess,
It's after Bashir got captured, they went through the whole,
Yeah. Oh, well, no, they got Worf. That's what he was
Worf.
waiting for. He got Worf, and he had the big fight with him. But anyway, John comes up, at one point, this guy comes up to me in this makeup, right, with the eye out, and he goes, "James." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Hertzler." I said, "What?" Hertzler. And it took me a while. I was like, "Do I know you?" And he said, "Zorro, Spain, Hertzler." I said, "Oh, okay, I get it now." That was funny.
Now you used obviously in Zorro you used swords, and in
Yeah.
Highlander swords, and then in Star Trek as a Jem'Hadar you were using weapons. Do you have a background in that, or is it just
Well,
been
that was the theater training that I was very happy to have had. My the 2-year program at Iowa. We had martial arts and sword work and all that stuff, which you generally get in theater training anyway, because almost in any period play there's Shakespeare on. There's duels. I mean, I did a Lope de Vega play when I was in grad school called The Star of Seville. Lope de Vega was kind of the Spanish Shakespeare. And we had to have a big duel in that. So, it's just fun. It's a skill that's nice to have. My neighbor where I live in Los Angeles, he has a company called Swordplay in Burbank, and he does a lot of the choreography for films and TV that you see, because that's his background. Fencing was his background. But yeah, it's just different to use different weapons. And
Yeah, we were talking last night about Adrian Paul's sword experience. I would love to be in the room when you just show up, one that's close by LA or something, and Grayson and McLeod once again would be wonderful. Fans would stand up for that.
Well, I have not seen it. I saw him at a convention. I guess maybe it was Louisville about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah,
that's I think one of the first ones he did.
Yeah, he actually signed my Highlander picture where the two of us. I have it up in my pub. He said, "You were one of the nastiest immortals I ever knew."
I thought, not only the interplay between the two was great, but I thought the sword work was some of the best I think they did.
Oh, well.
And it was early. It was first season, but it was
that
like
fight. It was pretty amazing because another interesting little story was there was two of the most famous sword choreographers.
Tony DeLongus
was I'm gonna forget their names now. Bob Diamond and Peter. Anyway, the names will come to me, but these two English guys, they had done the original Star Wars. They did the laser stuff. You can probably look it up. Peter and Bob were their first names, but I worked with one in Zorro and the other partner in Highlander. Right. And they had so much fun. They had so much relish in choreographing these sword fights. And this thing in Highlander was we were. If you ever been to Vancouver, we shot in Vancouver. They mine sulfur.
Sulfur, yeah.
And it's yellow. These big yellow mountains of sulfur by the side of on the shore of the ocean, I suppose it is.
Watauga River.
And when we were there, it was in the fall. I can't remember. It was probably '92. Yeah. I think it was 1992.
Something like that.
And they said there was going to be a night shoot. And I go, oh, okay. So we got there maybe, I don't know, started setting up 6, 7 o'clock at night. But we ended up, long story short, started pouring down rain. I mean, you would have paid a lot for this effect if you were doing it in a movie, but I mean, it looked like a movie, because this guy choreographed us like fighting up these treadmills or these conveyor belts, and then down something and then over here, and the fights. It took 12 hours. Long story short, 12 hours. We got done at like 3 and 4 in the morning. We were shot all night doing these, and we were soaking wet, from the rain and banging at each other. And plus, we were in these mountains. There's a picture out there on my table. These mountains of yellow sulfur. I thought later, thank God it was raining, because we would have been breathing that dust if it weren't raining.
Yeah, Adrian says that it took him about 3 weeks to get the smell of wet sulfur out of out of everything he had.
But it did look great.
It did. Great. And they had to be really careful because of the explosions, because you're on sulfur,
Oh yeah.
So he's talked about that.
Yeah, anytime an immortal, if you don't know the series, anytime an immortal kills another immortal, they get their life force, and there's all these fireworks that go off.
All right, any other questions? Go ahead.
Your training, all the training that you had in Iowa. So you did mention that you did dance as well. So have you had a role where you danced?
Funny you should ask. No, years ago there was kind of a soap, a semi-soap. It was an afternoon thing called Romance Theater. I hadn't even thought about that. I played a male stripper. So I had to bust out of some of these moves, you know what I'm saying? But that's about the only time I got to use my dance training. Oh, there's children in the room. So
yes.
But that was the only time I really got. I mean, but it's like dance. I at Iowa, I had a movement teacher who taught ballet. She was a ballerina herself. So it was just about you when you're doing any kind of period play or anything. And I mean, Trek especially. they like theater trained people because you're used to, you're not going to slouch when you hey man, the captain wants to talk to you. Because they like we were taught, she was always going around smacking us, because pulling up from here, you had to stand up straight, and I tell my son this now. It's like, anytime I see him doing this, I say, stand up straight, buddy. I don't want you getting into that habit of doing this. So it's like that, and when you learn to how to stand and how to move, and just it's especially good for period stuff. But I appreciate it any time I watch TV or film, and you see actors who have a sense of themselves and know how to move.
Been
That's
trained,
all.
yeah.
Yeah, that's all. Just it reflects training. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, speaking as a theater person, I think you can always tell on television or in the movies who's had theater training and who has not, because the person who's been trained in theater knows what to do with their hands. And you can always spot an actor who has received no theater training at all because
Yeah.
they have no idea what to do with their hands.
That's my biggest one. Anytime I'm on stage, these are like watermelons. I have no idea, but you find something to do, but
Well, that was the great thing about soap operas too, because the thing about theater, they don't film it much. You don't get to see it back. Whereas when you did soaps every day, they were recording you. Like they had 3 cameras going on. So and then about a week later, you could watch it. So you got used to watching yourself, not from an ego point of view, but just seeing the stupid things you did. It's like, oh man, why was I doing that? Was I doing that? Because everything shows, and like you said, every little movement draws attention to itself.
do you ever find yourself going back and watching older stuff, going, why the hell did I make that? Because it's about choices. And do you ever find yourself?
I don't visit my old work much. Got to tell you, if it comes on, fine. But like I said, most of the time these days I'm in front of a microphone, so I don't even think about that too much.
New Star Trek series coming out. Have you
I've
given
heard about
given any thought that if they were to bring you up?
That would be fantastic.
I mean,
Certainly.
you're of the age now. You could play an admiral or
I'm
a
of the
commodore.
age.
I
I like the way he says that.
And it could be a recurring character. I mean, you're not too young. You're not too old. I mean, you could do that for
Sure.
however long the
No,
series is on.
I would love to. That would be great.
Vaughn Armstrong kind of thing.
Yeah, Vaughn. He's another one, man. We go back. We did plays together. I worked with Vaughn on. We did Electra, the Greek play, at San Diego Old Globe, and my character killed him. It's just very incestuous with who kills who in this little Star Trek group.
Now, future guy on Enterprise. That started off strong and went nowhere. What would you? I mean, if you had your choice, what would you have liked to have seen?
Oh well,
come of that?
I talked to the producer, and they said no, we got plans for this guy, because I hadn't recurred on Trek before, so that was kind of interesting to me because I was going to recur and maybe become a regular.
Yeah.
And they never explained to me what they said. He was in the future, beaming himself back into the past, and then the show. How long did it run? Like three seasons?
4 seasons.
4 seasons, and
Yeah, Manny Cotto came in the middle of the 3rd and actually rescued it, but it was too late. I mean, there's probably more people in this room who watched the last season than people out in the world.
yeah. I just heard from Trek fans over the years that they never really considered it a Trek series, a true Trek series, and I don't know, Bakula. Huh?
Yeah.
Have they? Okay. Well, again, I didn't put much. Truck in it just because I didn't know where it was going, and then when it was over, okay, it's over.
It would
have been fun.
There was an article or something I read not long ago where they were saying that it was some of the writers and stuff were relegating the entire series as a Riker holodeck program based on historical events, but it wasn't exact, and they were going to just throw it away like that. And I was like, man, you had such great.
And there was something about
performances.
Roddenberry never wanted a prequel to classic Trek. Was that true?
Didn't want-
I heard
yeah.
him say. I heard that he said that. So the diehard fans were wanted to honor Roddenberry's wishes too, I suppose.
Supposedly that's the only way they got Scott Bakula was the fact that he could go, be the first,
Yeah.
inventing things.
Yeah, and I love Scott Bakula, but there was something a little goofy about him. As far as captains, all the captains talking about, the whole thing about the presence and character. I don't know. There was just something very nonchalant about him that I never thought he really relished that captain role.
I did an NCIS with him about a year and a half ago, and he's a little off the center track.
You
A
know,
lot of
well,
fun though, you know.
Oh yeah, Quantum Leap. You
Yeah.
know, he was able to play that character and have fun with it. You know, he could be goofy. I just didn't feel like it worked for the captain.
Right.
That was my personal opinion.
Chris.
Of video games, what other kinds of voice-over work do you do? And besides your acting experience, was there anything in particular that helped you develop your technique for that?
For voiceover?
Yes, sir.
Well, animated series, I've only done two. I was in, years ago, my first one was Starship Troopers. It didn't last long. It was only like 2-3 seasons. But I got to play, it was really a lot of fun. There was really good like CGI drawing. And it was based on, you know, the movie Starship Troopers. And I was playing a character. He was like the medic on the team, and Doc was his name. And that was fun. You know, it's just, you're all in a room together. And you get to, you know, it's like almost like a play because you're in front of microphones, but you see each other in the room, and if you're having a scene with somebody, you're reading it, but you can talk to them. And then years went by, and then a few years ago, I for a couple of seasons, I did Transformers Prime for the Hub, which was a really well-drawn, well-acted Transformers series. I got to play Wheeljack. He was one of the Autobots. You talk about swords. He had like two swords that he had behind him, and he was a fun character.
Hey,
He
just
kinda
keep
had
putting swords in your hands, man.
hey man, whatever. And he kind of had a Clint Eastwood kind of vibe to him. They talked like this. And that was fun to play. He kind of showed up whenever they needed him, and then split when they did. I'll be back when you need me. But yeah, so I mean, and that too, we were in a room. I mean, I got just to work with Peter Cullen, who does Optimus Prime and everything. You know, he's got this voice like, he's this little guy. This voice comes out of him. And a man named Frank Welker, he did Megatron, and he's another one that's these guys that are just voiceover royalty. You know, in the same room with them. It was just so much fun. That's the thing I love about voiceover. It's like there's so much less ego involved because nobody cares what you look like or how old you are. It's all about, you know, and there's so much ageism in Hollywood. It's like, you know, you can't do things on camera because you're too old or too fat or too whatever. But in voiceover, nobody cares about any of that. It's only about how you sound. And, you know, generally speaking, your voice doesn't change that much, even though you get older. So a lot of these guys have been doing it forever. Oh, I'm sorry, what's the second part of your question?
Was there anything outside of your theater experience that helped you develop your technique for that?
Man, I don't. You know, I think generally from theater, I had at Iowa too. I had a great voice coach, voice teacher, and you know, just learning from him, you know, techniques and things, and music too. I mean, I sing and I enjoy. I've done some cabaret acts over the years, and I've done some musicals, a handful of musicals. But yeah, it's just like going back to the love of words and speaking. You know, I think. And the poetry, I think the words are an actor's business, and that's what just finding ways to subtle variations. I mean, the subtlety of delivering lines is always and continues to intrigue me. So it's all grist for the mill, as we say.
All right, what was it like, you know, working with legends like Patrick Stewart? And so, I mean, they said the
There he is, right
yeah,
there.
I mean, they said that the atmosphere on the set was always very serious, but they also knew how to play and have fun.
The only time I met him, it's another funny story. You know, when I played the Takar and Joe Brill character in Next Gen, and I worked mainly with Gates McFadden, you know, and she and I had scenes together, and she's sweet as could be. I've seen her at conventions, you know, over the years. She signed my picture to me. There's this picture out there with the two of us. And at one point, when the character is like faking his own death, he's like lying in the medical room, right? And he's lying there with a sheet over him, and she's saying something. Maybe it's even the autopsy or something. We're thinking about doing the autopsy, and Patrick Stewart, you know, he comes in and he says a few lines to her and looks at me, you know. And so while we were waiting for the thing to set up, I'm like, enjoy your work, man. It's like, oh, thank you. That's like the only exchange I ever had with him. But I certainly admire his work, everything he's done.
Got a mark of approval from a dead guy.
What are you going to do? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I asked this question of the previous guest too, so just trying to get a take of the actors' side of the guidelines that CBS put out. Do you have any comment on, working with fan films? Would you have considered it, and would you consider it now that they say Star Trek actors cannot work in fan films?
Who says that? I'm sorry.
CBS, the guidelines for fan films, you can't hire anyone who's worked on any Star Trek series of any kind.
Yeah, they got serious.
Well, what's
about it.
CBS got to do with it? Are they doing it?
They have license. I mean, they
have
hold
the
a-
license
Yeah,
now?
they hold a license. CBS Paramount holds a license.
Oh,
on
do
it.
they? Oh,
Yeah.
CBS Paramount. Hello. They merged, huh? I know. What do I know? I didn't realize Paramount was owned by CBS. Oh, okay. I haven't been asked to do a fan film. It's sort of a new world for me. Somebody's calling. It's my wife. I'm talking. So I mean, I guess I just have to cross that. But I mean, how were fan films made, like with Tim Russ and those guys?
Well, that's had to stop.
Oh, they put a stop to it after
Yeah,
that.
with the Axonar lawsuit, I guess you're not totally up on what happened there. But basically, when Axonar got sued by Paramount, they sent out guidelines to basically curtail what you can make as a fan film anymore. They
Who
put,
got sued? I'm sorry.
Alec Peters and Axonar. They were going to make that 2-hour movie. And they hired a lot of Star Trek actors, and they raised over $1 million to make it, all this kind of stuff. So Paramount stepped in, and so to continue to let the fans make films, they've really put some stringent guidelines on what you can do. For example, you can only make a 15-minute episode, or if you want to do a 2-parter, you can go up to 30 minutes, and that's it. You can't hire anyone who's ever got a paycheck working on Star Trek anywhere, doing anything.
I didn't know that at all.
And you can't make a series. You can do a one-off and you're done.
Okay.
So things like that. But they did say you can't hire actors that ever worked in Star Trek.
That have ever worked in Trek.
Yeah.
I mean, but how can they stop?
Well, that's why I want to ask you. I'm asking your perspective on that. Would it stop you if someone came up and said, "Hey, can we hire you for one day to do a fan film with us?"
Well, again, you got in Hollywood, you worry about whose toes you're stepping on. Sorry. Oh, yeah. In Hollywood, you worry about whose toes you're stepping on. So it's like if they're doing another series, you go, well, I don't want to piss these guys off necessarily.
Totally understandable.
Yeah. So that would be my reservation again, but I haven't been approached, and I've learned more about these fan films here than I've ever heard it before. But again, I don't do many conventions these days. So
We actually considered, before it came down, I worked with a group in Ticonderoga, and it's one that JJ's done some stuff with in Tim.
Oh, yeah.
And I banded your name around a couple of times for
okay.
character roles, and then everything came down and they shut everything off.
Man, that's interesting. I'm literally first time hearing about it. So it's
Well, they're showing all the fan films made this year in a room down there. So
Are they? Yeah,
maybe
I'd
you
like
want to go
see
check them
some.
out.
I would like to see that. Yeah.
Some of them are as good as, if not better than, some stuff CBS Paramount came out with.
Wow, that's great though. I mean, I admire that.
Yeah.
Good on you guys.
Next question, anyone? Yeah, go ahead. Just holler.
Just holler.
Just holler. Michael.
Well, I was thinking, you were in the Next Gen episode playing Jabril,
trying
to steal the metaphasic shielding, and, oh, by the way, kill Beverly Crusher.
Okay.
And a few episodes later, you're a lieutenant on the bridge
Yeah.
trying to save Beverly Crusher using the metaphasic shielding. How did that irony play out for you?
Well, I'd forgotten that, but thank you for reminding me. I do remember now there was something about it. It wasn't, like the character Barnaby goes, wasn't there something about, about metaphasic? Yeah.
You had it in the computer somewhere.
That's right, that's
you
right.
You dug it up and made it work.
That's right. Yeah.
So
That's a character that I would have liked to have seen come back, Barnaby,
well, we
that was
liked him
fun.
too. you
Yeah.
know.
But, I was basically taking Worf's place on the bridge when he was a prisoner of,
Well, yeah.
and I, didn't want to step on his toes, but it would have been nice just to recur.
Right,
as
and,
that
and you had
character.
this thing going with that other young lieutenant where you were kind of sniping at each other, remember?
That's
Steve?
right.
Yeah, I like that relationship too.
Could have been a
yeah.
storyline there.
Yeah.
Coming from soap operas like I did. Oh, come on. Trek was a soap in space, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, come on,
Now, if you go out and like mention that what you just said, mention that to David Gerald. A year from now, we'll have a book that outlays how the two of them connected.
Oh, well,
David
yeah,
will do
yeah,
that.
Yeah, David will do that, right?
Connections, yeah.
there
It's
you
all
go. There you
interesting.
go.
Yeah, well, even like the actors that connect, that
Yeah.
you worked with before. That's what's great about it.
Absolutely.
And anyone else?
Well, I mean, other than voiceover work, what's next for you? What do you have coming down the pike that we can be looking out for?
I don't know. You know, it's just every day I'm running everywhere. It's like I tell people I'm busier now than I've ever been. And because I mean, back when I was doing just like primetime guest star stuff, you'd do one and then months would go by where you'd audition every once in a while, but then when I got into voiceover, what's up?
Just gonna ask if you could go into how the agent. You say you're waiting for the next thing to come along.
Yeah.
How does that process go? That you make the connections, the agents, and they say, "Hey, I suggested you for this role." In other words, how do you get the continuation of your career so that you keep getting jobs and such?
Well, I was just saying, the point is, I used to do these primetime guest star, and you were top of show, you made a good chunk of change, and then it has life after it, this kind of thing. I've even done a couple of Highlander conventions. They don't have many of them, but then there would be these long periods where you do nothing, and then when I got into voiceover about 4 years ago, man, it's like every day I'm auditioning. I have a booth in my house where you can record yourself and send it in MP3 to the agents or whoever needs it. I've even done a couple of jobs from my house. I have a basement in Los Angeles, which is very unusual, but and my house was built in 1927, so it was probably a root cellar back in the day, and I enlarged it and made it into like a little guest area. But it's very quiet down there, so I built a little voice booth. It's very rudimentary, and I just have a mobile preamp, and then I'm just able to put it through some whatever they're called, and then send it as an MP3 to my agent, and so it saves a lot of drive time. But literally every day I have 1, 2, 3 pieces of copy I have to record, or I have to go someplace in LA, in the Valley or down in Los Angeles to record at a studio. And they're auditioning constantly because think about how many times you hear voiceover on the radio or on television. You don't see the person, but you hear them, right? They're selling this, selling that. And then also the video games are on strike right now. The Screen Actors Guild and SAG-AFTRA now it's called. The two merged, but a few months ago they went on strike against video games for. I mean, like I said, I've done so many, and if you're theater trained, it doesn't hurt you as much as. But one of their big things was vocal stress, because I don't know how many of you play video games, but the actors have to die in a lot of ways, so you got a lot of that stuff where you're gargling razor blades. But again, if you produce it correctly and you got like a day to rest, it never bothered me. But also they also want to share profits, which also because some video games are hugely popular and make a lot of money. And so the actors only get paid once, and so they want residuals for actors. And so I understand that too. Like a Metal Gear Solid, if it goes over millions of dollars, then share it with the actors. But little by little, video game companies are making deals with the union, and there's a lot more of them coming around and signing on. So there's that, and then when I got into on-camera commercials too, I'm busy in that. I go out all the time, and I do it, and who do I have to be? Who am I this time? Yeah. And you go, you play your character, and then you come and I forget it. I literally forget it. And then if I have a callback, that's gravy. And then if you get the job, that's even more gravy. So I don't go out theatrically at all anymore. Or very rarely, once in a great while, my theatrical agent will call and say, "We need you to be here for this," and I go, "Oh, okay." And it's fun, but I just approach it as anything else. I tell you, my ego has taken such a back seat that largely since my kid came along, Yeah. And it's all about him and about just providing for my family. And if people are paying me to talk, that's fine. But I literally do whatever they need me to do, and I don't have my ego's not tied up in it. Yes, sir.
Just a quick follow-on is like when you do the audition, they send you some words, and do you like send 3 or 4 versions to say which one do you like best?
You can. I mean, they'll often specify don't do any more than 2 takes, or do a British accent on this and then American accent here. We want to hear it 2 ways. I go, oh yeah, fine, whatever. You have those. That's just your toolkit as an actor. You just bust that out, whatever they need, and again, I send it off and I don't think about it anymore. And you know, in voiceover, there's very, very rarely is there callbacks. But these days, there's so many people in voiceover too. I'm sure there's a lot of Atlanta actors who send in voiceover from their studios at home. Washington D.C., I have an agent who sends me copy, and a lot of time, you know, like he sent me something the day before I left, 2 days ago, that I had already read for in Los Angeles. So I know that they're looking for it in Washington too, and here. It's for like TripAdvisor. It's like one of those companies. They're looking for their new voice. And I thought, man, these people must have to listen to 1 million voices. And you know, there's got to be some nepotism involved too. It's like they'll like an agent, or they want a certain actor. Yeah.
Got to.
Stealing. Oh. Oh.
Yeah.
No, I think you
I know
definitely know it. That's
Yeah.
they can't use you without
Right.
compensating
Right.
you in some way. But yeah, that rarely happens.
Okay, bucket list items. Is there anything that you ever wanted to do, or a dream role that you thought about, maybe in the back of your head still sits there and says, God, if I had a chance to do one more big thing, this would be it. Anything? That
Oh well, I'd love to be a lead in a primetime series. I mean, that's still a goal I haven't never had. I've recurred and I've done guest stars, but I've never been a lead in a series. And you know, like I said, starting out with my look, I was either going to be the lead or the bad guy of the week, and most of the time the leads were already taken, and so I was the bad guy of the week. But I mean, in soaps I was able to do a series. I was a series regular in that, but that primetime nut was a little harder to crack, and now that I'm a little more out of it, I don't dream about it so much, but it would certainly be nice as on the bucket list.
Well, I know, like you did about a year's worth of the 5-Hour Energy commercials, and I thought that character was, when I first saw it, I was like, God, he looks familiar, and then I realized it was you, and then I was like, that is such a comfortable, folksy character. I was like, I'd love to see that type of character, you know, expanded on even more.
Oh well, doing a Western would be
Yeah.
so much fun, man. You know, I
think we're
love
poised
that.
ready for Westerns to make a comeback, really.
I definitely, man. I grew up with Westerns. I'm sure some of you guys did. I mean, John Wayne and all those, Robert Mitchum, all those
Clint
guys,
Eastwood
man.
even, you know.
Oh, Eastwood, yeah. Well, I got to work with Eastwood twice. I did these very small roles in Flags of Our Fathers and Changeling.
Yeah.
Flags of Our Fathers, I played a reporter in a big scene, and you know, but he always wants to meet everybody that works for him. So you know, I got to go and say hello, and I love your work, that kind of thing. But you come into his presence, you definitely do. Talk about an aura. This guy, you know, is like, but he's also, you know, there's an element that he's very plain. He's a very plain guy, just soft-spoken guy, and he knows what he wants. And then I got to work with him again on Changeling. I did a small part in that. But yeah, to do a Western that would be definitely a bucket list. And I often get called on to do Sam Elliott's voice. You know, just that kind of laconic, laid-back kind of thing that Sam Elliott does. And I met him at something we were doing. It was some kind of appearance for charity or something, and I happened to be there with Barbara Luna. You guys know who Barbara Luna is?
Oh, Luna's great. Luna's fantastic.
What a character. I happened to, yeah. 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Wrapping
Thank
up. I know that one. Counting down. But anyway, I just asked her to go with me because I knew she was part like old Hollywood, and
Oh, she is.
because there was a lot of older Hollywood types there. And I ended up chatting with him, and I said, you know, I enjoy your work. And he said, well, you look familiar. Where do I know you from? And I said, well, okay, because I had just done Gods and Generals, which is the sequel to Gettysburg.
Right.
He had done Gettysburg, of course, and I played a Confederate colonel in this Gods and Generals, which was the sequel. And he said, well, that must be it. I just watched that. And I go, oh, well, I mean, I had a small part in that too, but I was flattered that he thought he knew me from somewhere. But yeah, it was he was a really cool guy. But I'd like to see, I'd just like to do a Western. So anybody want to write a Western from me, please jump on it.
I mean, I love Eastwood's direction. It's like he lets you play around for a while. I've watched them like on a set, and he'll let the actors play around, and you don't get cut or action. It's just you do it a couple of times, and he's like, all right, we've had about enough of that one. Let's, you know, I'm just like,
yeah, that's the
okay,
thing.
you're telling me you're done, you're finished.
He doesn't say action. He
Go
walks up, he'll talk to you, and then he'll just walk away. And the camera guy was like, I was in a car, I was supposed to be in Changeling. I was supposed to be driving this guy. I pick up the guy, and he ends up killing me. but the character. But I'm driving this, and I was supposed to go, and he walked away. He goes and he sits and he's looking at a monitor, and I looked at the camera guy and said, "Is he going to say action?" He said, "No." He said, "You go whenever you want to." I was, okay. And apparently it was from his days of doing westerns when the director would go, "Action!" The horse would start. And he hated that whenever the horse would be shocked by a director yelling action. And plus, I think he just hated it in general.
He's just kind of go.
Yeah. He
All
just
right.
walked away.
Time for one last question. All right. Well, I'd like to take a moment again to thank for such an entertaining morning, such a great time. And I think we have you back tomorrow as well. So
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James Horan.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
And coming up next, we have JG, so stick around. That's always a bit of fun. All right.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you're going to interview me. That's great. That's great. Bum, 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 bum. All right.
All right. Good morning, mid-morning, early
Good
afternoon.
morning,
Yeah.
Atlanta.
Here we go. Well, the man to my right needs absolutely no introduction. I have worked several different conventions and also worked in Ticonderoga with you on Of Gods and Men many moons ago.
Ticonderoga. That wasn't quite Ticonderoga.
That was Port Henry. Now it's Ty.
That was in Port Henry.
Yeah, now it's Ty.
It was the worst working conditions available on this earth.
Oh, it got worse.
However,
It got worse.
it was, no, it didn't. It was the best experience I've had in this business.
Yeah.
So it was awful. It was 140 degrees in that
In
building.
that studio, yeah.
There was no air conditioning. We literally went out to a car, all the Klingons, and sat in a car that I rented to turn the air conditioning on between scenes so we could get to the next scene without melting. And anyway, that was.
Now we got to bring you up to the new place because it's all different. You know.
This is it's
Weird.
very awkward. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna hold on.
All right. But yeah, let's give it up for Mr. J.G. Hertzler.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing. It's
And
me.
Mr. Gary Graham.
Yeah, bastard. He's. You know, has anybody seen Prelude to Axanar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, Gary has Soval, and every time he has something, it's like somebody's sticking an ice pick through one of his cheeks, or in these cheeks back here. Everything's sort of pained for that Vulcan. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, or whatever his words were. We were asked to do this, but unfortunately, we could not. He's in so much pain. It's a great choice. It's a great acting choice. I mean, he's a brilliant actor. Unfortunately, we disagree completely on Earth politics. But besides that, we love each other. I really get a kick out of him. Plus, he owns a Porsche, which is really nice.
That.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't have a Porsche. I have a 1982 Mercedes SD diesel, 300 SD, that has 5 cylinders. Are you aware that a Mercedes has 5 cylinders? Yes, it's true. And it's not one being spared. They were built with 5 cylinders. Only the Germans would be able to do that. I started up, and it does sound like a Panzer, you know. It is an amazing. Anybody have diesels in here? No, you don't. A diesel car.
One.
You know, how old is it? It's probably a new diesel, right? No. Well, that's new. Anything in this century is a new diesel. Okay, well, I don't know if it sounds, but the old diesels, it really does sound like you're starting a troop carrier of some sort. Anyway, it stopped at 253,000 about 10, 15 years ago. I have no idea. There's probably 300,000 miles on it. But it starts after, diesel gases gets viscosity. So it's really hard to start, supposedly. But it sat through all winter. I maybe started it twice through the entire winter, about 6 months in upstate New York. And I started the other day. It started fired right up. You have to wait till the glow plugs, turned. The light goes off, and you could start it. It's like, no, halt! You cannot start the car until the glow plugs go off. Halt! All right. Anyway.
I was talking actually last night in the little champagne thing, and I don't know if you remember or not, but back when Garrett first.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'm just.
What the hell are you saying
you're
about
a busy,
me?
You're a busy guy.
Are you saying I'm just ancient, or
No,
I was
you're a
drinking
busy guy.
heavily?
Busy guy. Well, either one. But it was when Garrett first took over at Dragon Con, and it was the first Miss Star Trek Universe pageant. And I remember for some reason Garrett pulled me up to judge, and I had Renee Aubergenois on one end, Bob Beltran, who I'd had a previous run-in with, and I was like, but he turned out to be fantastic. Myself, and then I had Bob and JG on the other end of the table. And I don't think I've ever laughed so hard, and I don't remember more than 3 minutes of that entire contest, because we were just over there having a great time. So, anytime you get
I have
a
no
chance,
memory of that.
see?
I don't think it happened.
See? I remember Renee got up afterwards, and we were like, well, who do you want to vote for? He says, I don't care. I'll never get that 2 hours back of my life. I'll never get it back ever again. He just walked out.
Oh, Renee walked out?
Yeah. Well,
Oh, yeah.
It's like they went through the first portion of it. It's kind of like what Eric does for the MKE. But he got done with the first part, the introductions, and Renee's like, okay. It's like, now we're going to do talent. Okay, he sits back down. And you just kind of see him go from here to here to here. Each time he got ready to leave, and by the time that contest was over, it's like Bob and JG, you all were down there cracking up, laughing. Beltran and I were having a great time. Renee was just ready to leave.
Renee didn't want to be there. Huh?
He was just, it's just like, it was just 2 hours of his life he felt he'd never get back again. He was just kind of like, this
You're
is
saying he
going
didn't
on
enjoy
and on.
himself.
I don't know if he did or not.
He was sort of like morose.
Yeah,
and-
like Renee.
Yeah, I'll tell him what you say. That's
Tell him I said hi.
I'll see him very
Tell
soon
him I said hi.
in July, late July. When is not Dragon Con,
Con's,
but when is
Labor Day.
No, when is Creation in Vegas? When is that?
Yeah,
August. Yeah, so I'll see him in August.
Well, tell him
I'll
I
pass
said
it
hey.
along.
Tell him I said hey.
Yeah, he says hey, and you're morose.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, there is that. Garrett was droning. On and on. So.
Did Garrett do his one of his light stick dances on the panel?
Not that one. Not that time. He was too busy trying to keep everything together. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. He was the interlocutor.
Yeah.
Ah, that's right. That's an old word. Anyway, I'm doing I had an idea a while back. Does anybody really care about Deep Space Nine or Star Trek?
Yeah.
No, all right.
It was
I'll
on
skip
for a
what I
year
was
or
going to
so,
say. I'm going to be working on a Mark Twain show. And are there any wig makers here?
Yeah, I do.
You make wigs?
I make them. Yeah.
You ventilate
I
wigs?
Vent and hand tie and the whole nine. Yeah, seriously. I'll hand tie. I'll
I
vent,
take back everything nasty that I've said
That
to
you
you.
just
I need your help,
How
my
far
friend.
back do you want to go?
Well, as far as I need to
Okay.
for this wig.
What you need?
I need a Mark Twain wig.
Okay.
But the first gig I'm doing, well, I won't talk about that. But I've been wanting to do a Mark Twain forever and ever and ever and ever because he was probably one of the most beloved people that ever lived in this country, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Samuel Clemens. I mean, he said such incredible things. But then in starting to study, I never really studied him until now. But and I've never read Pudd'nhead Wilson. Have you? Who's really read Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer? Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did Big River a while back, and I did all my research by reading.
Oh, you
it.
did?
Yeah. So I did.
Did you direct Big River?
No,
or?
no. I acted years ago in it, and then I came back a few years ago and then did PAP. So I had a chance to play both sides.
Oh, wow.
Which was great.
Yeah. But he said so many incredibly wise things. But he said kindness is a thing that a blind man can see and a deaf man can hear.
Mm-hmm.
Kindness, it's to me, it's a incredibly beautiful thought. And he also said about memory, which I have a constant growing problem with, is a young man can remember everything that happened to him and many things that never happened to him, but an old man, I can only remember the things that never happened to me. And I don't mind telling you about them at length. Yeah. And politicians, the famous one, of course, politicians in diapers need to be changed frequently. Mm-hmm. And for the same reason. Yeah. So anyway, I had this thought not long time ago, 2 months ago. I said, I'd like to run against the congressman in my district in upstate New York. I'd like to run for office against him. Now, it's really a pipe dream because you need 3,500 good signatures within a district to be able to get your name onto a ballot. 3,500 people. Now, if I could run, if all you guys lived in the 23rd district of upstate New York, then I could get it done. But there aren't that many Star Trek fans in the 23rd district. But secondly, you have to get like 7,000 to get 3,500 good ones. I said, geez, that's tough. But I had the thought, I said, I want to run against Tom Reed, but I want to run as Mark Twain. And because I think politics in America have changed sufficiently to allow that to happen. You know, I think I could actually do it. And it would be it's like a get out of jail free. I could basically say anything as Mark Twain, as long as I say it with some sensitivity. I'm good to go. So anyway, that's where I got the idea. And I said, you know, I really should just work on a Mark Twain show.
There's also a guy in Charlotte that I know that's even better than I am, and I can get him to do the work as well, cheaply.
Oh, you're begging off now.
Well, I'm just saying, if you want really good quality.
I want good, but I want you to do it.
I'll be
Because
involved.
I know you.
I'll be involved, and I'll stay on top of him.
Did you work on wigs at all?
I did wig styling, but I was mainly makeup and acting.
Gotcha.
So I did a lot of the makeup and stuff, and of course you guys brought in your own stuff on Gods and Men. But
yeah, somewhat.
I was doing some of the extra Klingons and such.
Well, we'll talk.
We'll talk. All right.
Oh, okay. So that's it then.
Thank
you
for
being
Good
here. Let me see questions about. So get us started. And someone, you know that your red-headed hair and beard. I respect the beard. Guys with red beards. Any other red beards in here? No. Former. Well, voila. But yeah, I respect the beard. I love the beard. And I got this beard. I'm gonna have to. I need it for Martalk for the Creation, Las Vegas this year. But I'm doing the Mark Twain gig before, so I've made up this whole thing about. You know, I'm in the middle of my tour through Europe. And I've noticed that just about every older man here has a beard here in Europe. So in order not to stand out like some ugly American, I've grown this beard. So bear with me while and I'm getting used to it. So I'll probably take a vote on whether to lose the beard or not. But for right now, I just want to be European among the Europeans. Now, moving on. But that's going to be my excuse for having a beard while I'm doing Mark Twain, something like that. So, what was I going to say? Something. Oh God, is that a Guinness down there? Or is that a Coke?
Yeah,
it's a Guinness.
Is
there a Guinness in the room?
Or are you just happy to see me?
Yeah. So anyway, question. Somebody have a question before I launch into some other. Oh, you have a question.
I can. Yeah.
Ask me a question.
Let's. It's kind of a good starting place. Let's go back to the very beginning. How did you get started in the business? What's your background, education-wise, and
The business of acting.
Of acting, yeah.
Well, it all started in sixth grade. I was appointed to put on the class play. Sixth grade. Had no experience, although I did some pantomime in the fifth grade. Didn't go well. But despite that, they asked me to do this play. So I wrote, directed, and starred in. Now, my two friends thought they were the stars, but I was actually the star. They supported me nicely. Nelson Gardner and David Olson. Have you heard of them? No, of course you haven't. It was some sort of pageant. This is a true story about. I remember at one point we did the Suribachi Monument on Mount Suribachi. You know, the guys, the Marines raising the American flag on Mount Suribachi. We didn't have enough guys, so there was like three of us. So we had to have a guy that had wore an extra soldier attached to him as a puppet. No, we didn't do that. But then all I remember is that, and there was some sort of shtick about bootleggers, and it was the American pageant. We took Mount Suribachi and we sold illegal liquor, and that's the American way. Anyway, then I took a break from 6th grade till senior in college. And I played football until I played football until I was an outside linebacker. Kicked some ass. Are there any children here? Oh, I'm sorry. You know, I kicked some rear ends, and you know, I was outside linebacker. And the only thing I did well as an outside linebacker, as an athlete, I had no real skills. I ran as fast as I could. I was an outside linebacker, so I'd run on a crash course into the backfield of the opposition and hit as many people as I could with my head. And I even remember trying to block punts. I would jump up, and the guy would block me, and I would come right down on my head. And somehow, I still have some vestige of a memory left. I don't understand why. And then I went into a life where I had to memorize things forever. I said, what? And I have one good eye. My left eye is a bad eye from birth. And so naturally, I went into a profession that involved sword fighting with people slashing blades across my face. And somehow I survived that. I don't know how I made these decisions. Evidently, there was no mentality involved at all. And somebody told me about the great fight in Princess Bride with Mandy Patinkin, talking about, he's such a brilliant. I was doing The Count of Monte Cristo live on stage, 8 shows a week. 8 shows a week. With 4 sword fights in every show. So that's 32 sword fights live a week. Without the ability to cut, okay, let's do that again. Mm-hmm. The sword fight had to go. And it had to go right without killing the other person until it was time for them to die. So one of the actresses in the show said, "Oh, John, you have to see Mandy Patinkin in Princess Bride. He does all his own fights." Bridget, I do 32 fights live a week with you. So anyway, I have a natural prejudice against Princess Bride. But it is a good fight.
Now, you had a background, you did sword fighting in Zorro.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful series, by the way. And then
once I got into it.
Well, yeah. And then again picked up a sword in Highlander. Yeah. And then
now let me tell you about Highlander. Well, Zorro was fun, but Duncan is an incredible sword fighter. He's really, really good. And we every week we had sort of a sword, but we were fighting with very soft blades. I mean, unless it was a hero shot where you had a close up on the blade, we were fighting with bendable swords.
Right.
If I hit him, it would actually bend. Anyway,
there's Duncan Reger.
Because he was Zorro,
Yeah,
Duncan
right.
Reger. Yeah, you can't hurt Zorro in a fight. I mean, literally in Zorro, at one point I had Zorro. I was going to hang him. I had caught him. I was the Alcalde. I was the guy who chased Zorro every week, and I caught him. And I was going to hang him. I had him on the gallows. And somehow, Zorro said, "Oh, well, yeah, but no, don't worry about me. I've got nothing in my sleeve." I said, "Really?" And I looked down there, and of course he goes, bam, and knocks me off the scaffold. And I said to the director, I said, "Ray, how can I be so stupid how can the Alcalde be so stupid as to bend down and look up the sleeve?" And he said, John, it's called Zorro. Zorro. It's not the Alcalde." I said, "Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry." "Really?" Boom. Anyway, what was I going to say? Something about.
But we were
something
talking
else.
about sword fighting. You know, that all the
Oh,
fighting
yeah.
Highlander.
The Highlander. Adrian Paul was a great sword fighter, man. He had to fight with new people every week. And they brought me in to do one of the Immortals who gets his head cut off eventually. But the fight instructor, this was the story, was a guy named Robert Anderson, who was he was the massive fight choreographer for years and years and years and years.
Star Wars.
He had, Star Wars. But he had gone back. He worked with Errol Flynn,
yeah.
you know, and he was a master. He was 75 at that point, and I was 42 or something like 43, something like that. And we rehearsed the fight for 8 hours the day before, just Bob Anderson and me. And I have done a lot of sword. It was an Italian rapier, which has a short hilt and a very long and heavy blade. So it takes a toll on your arm every time you have to pull a cut. Pulling a cut means you stop the cut without hitting the person. So it takes a toll on your elbow. It's like tennis elbow. Or what's the other one? Pitchers, you know, the Tommy John surgery. So I did it and the next day I had a sore arm, but I got through the fight. For 20 years after that, which on into the mid 2000s. Well, even today, I have a sore elbow because there was 8 hours straight with that Italian rapier, killed my elbow tendons, the cartilage there. But Bob Anderson was 75 years old. Didn't bother him at all, you know? I said, Jesus. Anyway, I've worked with some great choreographers. Have you seen Master and Commander?
Mm-hmm.
That was a choreographer named Dan Speaker. Dan Speaker, I did a show called The Adventures of... No, what was it? It was Treasure Island. The New Adventure Begins, and it was made specifically to open the casino and hotel Treasure Island. The owner of it, Steve Wynn, you know who that name, Steve Wynn. Mm-hmm. He owns half of Las Vegas. Kerkorian, I think, owns the rest. But he wanted to make a movie, a made-for-TV movie about Treasure Island, to open his casino. Yeah. The casino or my performance? Thank you. Not my performance.
No.
Of course not. You did mean my performance. You son of a bitch. I know your name. I know your address.
Hey, He paid to see it, so you know. Hey, you got your
That's
money.
right. That's the way it goes.
You got your money.
I've gotten some bad reviews in my life. I've gotten some great reviews. I've gotten some. That's an actor's life, unless you're very lucky. Nobody gets praised all the time unless you're really good, and I'm not. I started out. You asked me a long time ago how I started out.
Yeah. I mean, roll with this, you know.
Started out as sixth grade. Then I took a break till I was a senior in college, and I did a non-speaking role on stage at Bucknell University as a crazy man in Marat Sade, which is a play about an insane asylum, about the Marquis de Sade and Paul Molière. No, not Molière.
No.
Marat, Jean-Paul Marat, that's right. And I didn't have any words, but every time the character that was the lead, Marquis de Sade, would get up from his little throne to go have I would race up in and sit in his throne. And it's me sitting in that throne is so much like Martok sitting in the captain's chair, and earlier the Duke of York sitting on the throne of England. I've been chasing that throne my entire acting life. And I never legitimately end up there. And if I do, I soon get my head cut off or, you know. But, so there was, to college. And then I went into the federal government for a year and a half, working for the General Services Administration in an office of the EPA. We owned, GSA owned, the General Services Administration, owned the hotel where Trump has the new International Trump Hotel, you know, the old post office building in D.C. That was one of the things we owned, and the people of America owned it. And so what was I doing for the EPA? Oh, I did a solid waste management thing. You want to know about, you don't want to, you want to know about theater, television and film. I won't go into my, suffice it to say that I called in an investigation, and then a guy came into my room and he said, close the door. He said, big guy, like Robert Shaw in the Sting. Remember the Sting? The Big Mick?
Yeah.
He had that slight limp and he was scary. You know, Robert Shaw was one of the greatest actors of all time. He said, the guy came into my room, and in my mind, I'd already I'm seeing him as Robert Shaw. And he says, John, there's not going to be an audit. I said, yeah. Yeah, no, he didn't have a Scottish accent. But there's not going to be an audit. I said, yeah, I called it in. I just called it in yesterday. He said, no, John, there's not going to be an audit. Why not? He said, because the collection of high-grade waste paper, because it's connected, John. I was 23. Connected. It's connected. I said, connected to what? It's connected.
Got to get the guys out there with the hats and such coming to see you.
Yeah,
You
things
know,
fall off
hey,
the truck. It
hey,
happens.
It is, you know.
I said, oh. And that's when I got into theater.
But you're still very politically connected, though. You still, you know, I would truly say that if of all the people I know, I would say that you are probably what I would define as a patriot. You know, you really are concerned about, you know, politics and government and where we are and where we're going, and you know, I think you're one of the few people.
I mean, you know. A lot. You know, Mark Twain gives you another take. It's really I'm mollifying my overly passionate stands against this and for that and for that. You know, because Mark Twain is able to approach everything with such a humor and such a perspicacity. I love that word. That it just let me use two in a row: sagacity and perspicacity.
There you go.
Is that good or what? Is that good? Yeah, that's good. Sagacity. Young lady, is she still? Oh, she's gone to sleep. There she is. You know what sagacity is? Sagacity. It's based on the word. It's a Latin word, I'm sure, but it's if you know what a sage is. A sage is a wise person. A sage knows. They know things. And sagacity is directly from sage, S-A-G. But my mother was a Latin teacher. In fact, the reason I got on Star Trek was because I could speak Latin. True story. Have you heard this story already?
Mm-mm.
Nobody here?
I haven't.
Oh, good. One person. Did somebody raise their hand back there? Kevin?
You can go out for coffee, you know.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So I was sitting outside, I was literally on the lot at Paramount Studios. I'd auditioned for something else, and I stunk up the place. I was bad. And I said, God dang it. You know, I just suck. What the hell am I doing this for? Have you seen La La Land? Have you seen La La Land?
Yeah.
For those who have seen it, you know that moment she has in front of the mirror, and she's saying, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can't. It's such a good portrait of an actor's life in L.A. There's so much rejection. in any part of theater or television, but in the big pond in Los Angeles or New York City or London, in the big pond, it's very depressing. And some survive and some don't. And, somehow I'm like oblivious sometimes. I don't get as affected as I should be. Anyway, I was just pissed sitting on a bench and upset. And a guy walked past and he said, "Oh, John, there's a part that might be just right for you in Star Trek. Here, why don't you take a look at it?" I said, "Well, what is it? What's the part?" He said, "It's a Klingon." And I said, "Oh, Christ, a Klingon. I'm a Shakespearean actor, for heaven's sake." The Galaxy Quest thing, Klingon, yeah. Okay, let me just take a look at it. So I read it. And I went in, and my first attempt at the audition was, all right, I'm not going to be your basic Klingon, sort of overbearing, angry, short-tempered, loud, raucous. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be more like what Gary did with Soval. I'm going to be cerebral and intellectual and conspiratorial. I'm going to be, quiet and thoughtful, and I'll go the other way. So I did it, and they said, good. Now, do you know what a Klingon is? And I said, "Oh, right. Let me guess. You want me to be angry, loud, overbearing, obstinate, disgusting, big?" They said, "Yes." Fine. So there was a folding chair in front of me. It was an old folding chair that if the little rubber tip comes off the bottom, it's a very sharp point on that thing. So I took this chair and I went, "Fine." And I threw it against the wall. And these old studio buildings at Paramount are from the teens and the 20s. And they're built not with drywall, but with lathe and plaster. So the lathe is in the wall, these sticks, the furring strips and whatnot. And it went right in between and got stuck in the wall. And the chair is like sticking in the wall. But when I threw it, I ripped part of my thumbnail off, and it caught on the chair, and it was bleeding. So I was doing this thing. it was all my, how you get so angry, your blood boils in your head, you can't hear things anymore because the things are, and I was gesturing, and the blood was going, and "No, Worf, that is not how we shall deal with this. This is what we shall do. And please understand, I know what I'm talking about." And then I got to a place in it that, well, I'm going to combine two things for you. There was a sequence of Klingon in it. I didn't know how to speak any Klingon. So I said, what can I do? What can I do out there when I was preparing? I said, okay, I'll speak in German. No, German just sounds like German, and French sounds Spanish. I know a little Spanish, but it's not right either. Oh, I know Latin. So I did part of Cicero's fourth oration against, Jesus, just went out of my mind. I was going to say Clementine. It certainly wasn't Clementine.
No,
Catiline. It was my fourth oration, and it goes, "Quos tandem abortere, Catilina, patientia nostra, quam ad fidem nos eludet, insanatus haec intelligit, insanatus." And they said nothing, and there was no applause. I was done, and I left, and the coda to that story is that I had one of my best friends in Hollywood was Ron Canada, who he does a lot of movies, and he did a few Klingons, and he said, I got to tell you, John, Chris Wright, who was our agent, both of us had the same agent. He said, Chris Wright called me and said, Ron, there's some good news and some bad news. Because he had been told that he had the part of Martok. But they had to see one more person.
God, I hate that phone call. I hate that phone call.
Yeah. And he said, good news and bad news. Bad news is you didn't get the role of Martok. Good news is your best friend got it. And that's good news? Yeah. But that's all true. I compressed things a little bit for you, but that's basically all true. I bled. I gave blood to get the role of Martok, which seems only fitting, after I began to learn what Klingons are all about.
Now, your first role was the Vulcan captain, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, that was...
was that your first in Star Trek at all? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was in the pilot.
Right. DS9, yeah.
The pilot of DS9. Yeah, the only thing funny about that was my stuntman was just a trifle bigger than me, and I was big enough, but the guy was well, I don't know, maybe he wasn't, but there was an explosion, and my character gets killed when the starship gets blown up. Executive Officer Sisko survives and becomes the captain of the entire series. But I did not survive, and I did not become the captain of the entire series. Damn
For want
them.
of a nail.
For want of a nail, yes. A kingdom was lost.
Well, I know that during Axanar, Alec contacted me, and I sent you a uniform shirt, and he was like, well, you're a big guy. I think, and I remember, having phone conversations with you where you came back and went, this ain't going to fit. And I was like, Jesus, I'm big enough. I had to stop and
What
think.
uniform shirt was it?
It was the gold with it was before Travis had been established, but they were going to put everybody in the cage uniform, the gold with the knit collar and stuff like that.
Oh, it was just
Yeah.
it was like this, except it was tight,
Yeah.
very, very tight.
And I remember he was like, well, you're about JG's size, I said, yeah. And he goes, go ahead and send. And I remember sending it, and we had a series of phone conversations. You were just like, it ain't gonna fit. And I was just like, my God, I forgot how broad you are.
Well, I
Yeah,
was.
big time.
I was probably, I was much larger. When we did, I was really fat, actually, when we did Gods and Men. I was
Right.
surprised. That uniform didn't help. The one I ended up using, it was somebody's that wasn't quite. I noticed about it later that Martok's uniform was brilliant, the way it was made by the professionals in the business. The shoulder pads were really big.
Right.
And the suit itself was so well tailored. I mean, it made me look like $1 million, and I've never looked so good as I did as Martok. But that's why I played football. The last thing I did before every game was I'd stand in front of the mirror and look at myself and say, I look good. I got my hip pads just right, just a little sticking out here. That's good. Yeah, and I used to wrap each individual finger so I didn't cut my fingers up completely. Because anybody play football here in their youth? The first thing we were taught as defensive linemen was to hit the other person in the head. Mm-hmm. They said the words were, control the head, you control the body, hit him, So everything we were taught is illegal now. It's all illegal. And it's very funny because it's a different game, but these guys are huge and they're very fast. We were like, anyway. How do I get off on those things?
Go where the spirit moves you. Well, I know Eric we were talking about the fan film he was thinking about filming, and I know he asked me. He goes, I need a big maroon jacket. He says JG could fit yours. I've been down this road before, brother. So
that's funny. Well, the thing about there are two things. Axanar has been a debacle for 2 years because of the legal hassles. It's there's a lot of hating going on the internet too. I don't know Alec very well, but everything that I know about him, I perceive him to be an honest guy, and the love of his life was to do a film about Axanar. He really did want to. That's his motivation is pure, in my opinion. You know, and it hurts actually to see the negativity, but now hopefully we're past that. We're gonna produce 2 episodes that are 15 minutes each, which isn't a lot shorter than what used to be half-hour shows on TV. A half-hour show on TV is 22 minutes long.
Right.
And they used to do whole episodes in 22 minutes.
Right.
And you know, you've seen commercials that tell whole stories in a minute, you know, in 3 minutes. So I think I think we can do this. It depends on the scripts, you know, they got to be good. But I just wanted to put my words, my positive words in for Axanar and for the struggle to get it made, and the fact that it's coming to Atlanta. You know, I think Alec's from Atlanta, because
Well, North Carolina, Atlanta area, yeah.
is it?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
he's licensed as a lawyer in North Carolina, I believe.
Oh, okay. He's a lawyer? I didn't
He
know
was,
that.
or he's a
Well, I
legal
take back
advocate.
everything I said.
Yeah, there you go.
because
Hmm.
Are there any lawyers here? There's one,
Shakespeare said it best.
2. See, that's just like a lawyer, not raising his hand until he's forced to by his client sitting next to him.
He'll debate whether or not he's a lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, no, my agents are all lawyers. They're all lawyers. Mark Twain had a few things to say about his lawyers. Funniest thing he said, talked about, was about barbers, though. I love this. Have you ever heard Mark Twain's speech about barbers? No, nobody has. I don't know why, because it's incredible. For the men, it's especially true. I'm not going to get into it. Well, catch me later, and I'll do it. But it's a funny piece. And he had, yeah. What was I didn't want to go there to lawyers. Anyway, yeah.
We were talking about Alec, though.
Nah, question. And more questions. Anybody have
Any
a question?
questions? In the back.
Yeah, John.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you
Where's
could
the
please
microphone?
move to the mic that is set up for questions, we can then hear that on the internet when it's streaming. Thank you.
All right.
Who's talking?
Guy in the back. Sound guy.
Oh, wow. Nice. That was truly the voice of God back
It was.
there.
I liked it.
Please approach the microphone. Use it, otherwise you will not exist.
Can you please tell us a little bit about your involvement in this new project called The Circuit?
The Circuit is
Manu's project.
Manu Interrami. And I don't know where his last name comes from, but the word Interrami is an Incan sun festival. So I don't know if Manu is from Peru. Of course, with the name Manu, he might be from Peru, but Manu is what's the word? He's a force of nature.
It's unique.
Yeah, he's unique, definitely, but he's a force of nature in terms of dreams and getting things done. And you have to be a force of nature to get anything done in Hollywood, because it's unbelievably difficult to get a show produced, an idea produced, a story produced. It's to get it from idea to production. I have had a script. I wrote a script about the Spanish Civil War 16 years ago. Ed Asner he loved it, he pushed it. Martin Scorsese read it, said, I want to talk to you about it. Ed Harris wanted to be in it. And I'm still getting an option money for a 6-month option. It's been optioned every 6 months for 15 years, 16 years. And it's still not made.
Option 30 times. Jeez.
Yeah. And
are you prevented from crowdfunding and doing it yourself, or because of the option agreement?
it's way too expensive to crowdfund.
Wow.
It's about the Spanish Civil War, which there were 3,000 Americans, including some awfully famous people. You know, Hemingway was involved, Dos Passos was involved, Martha Gellhorn, Paul Robeson was involved. But 3,000 basic, common, everyday Americans, dock workers, union members, high school teachers, baseball players, volunteered to go fight Hitler in Spain in 1936. And it's a movie about those guys. And my figures are two fictional characters, but they're based on, one's based on my uncle, who was a pitcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers, the St. Louis Cardinals, and the Boston Braves, my great uncle. He played literally with Babe Ruth. And it's based on him and another character that's, anyway. But it's been, that's taken 16 years. They get involved in going to fight the Spanish, the Nazis in Spain. And to get from being a baseball player in a small town in Pennsylvania to fighting Nazis in Spain is a wonderful yarn. I think it's a tale that, and we don't know about it because the McCarthy era covered up our participation in the Spanish Civil War. Anyway, I won't go there.
When it gets made,
sorry.
When it gets made, my agent wants you to know I'm available.
Thank you.
I'll even take a cut and pay it.
You'd be great. You'd be great on the as a congressman on the interview. You know, interviewing in 1954 the people that you'd be great as a congressman asking questions. Isn't it true that you caused a riot on the docks in 1937 when the German ocean liner docked at the 46th Street Pier? Did you not cause that riot and then leave for Spain?
Did you or did you not? You know.
That's right. Are you now or have you ever been?
And the simple answer is yes, because you've pretty much covered both bases there.
That's
Either
right.
you are or you're not. Enterprise.
Good point.
Yeah. You went from Martok and then you played two different Klingons in Enterprise. How did you approach those so that you avoiding the obvious parallels?
I didn't. I said Martok was good. Why don't I just keep that?
Okay.
No.
Did you do a familial thing though, thinking maybe they were?
Kolos is a lawyer.
Right.
Kolos is a Klingon lawyer, and this is the way lawyers should have. If you lose a case as a Klingon lawyer, you go to jail with your client.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be. You know, instead, there's a contingency fee of $33 million, and he goes to jail. Oh, thank you. What was I saying?
You were talking about just the Klingon, approaching the characters.
I had no approach for Kolos. He was, I did. He was very. Martok was an unusual Klingon, but Martok was an unusual Klingon. Kolos was almost a non-Klingon. Kolos was, lawyers cannot take anything personally. Right. Am I right about that? Yes. And Klingons take everything personally. There is nothing we don't take personally. So it's a real battle to be calm, cool, and collected as a Klingon.
Well, I think we learned more about the Klingon culture from Kolos and in your portrayal in the way it was written. Because prior to that, we saw all Klingons as being this warrior caste, and all of a sudden in this episode, you're telling us.
I know they wrote it.
They
wrote it that way, and they were taking a risk, and it was. I had a wonderful time because I was with Scott Bakula the whole time, and Scott Bakula and I had been in Quantum Leap 12, 13 years earlier, where I got to punch him right in the nose because he jumped into a character. Do you remember Quantum Leap?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
He had jumped into a character that was marrying my daughter.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the guy. And I was 1919 Harvard. I said, I'm talking to Scott Bakula, who's playing this guy who's marrying my daughter, whom I don't like. And he says, on my honor, I'll trust. And you have no honor. You're not Harvard. I have no idea why I went there. It was with Scott.
Yeah.
But we were talking in the caves, and we were carrying dilithium crystals in the back. If you saw that episode of Enterprise, we both got stuck we both went to Rura Penthe to live on a prison planet for, I think I was sentenced to a year.
Yeah.
As the lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were carrying these big loads of rock, and the rock we were carrying was mica. And so it's a pretty dense thing, this mica. When we'd stand back there in the caves and say, okay, action, rolling, and we carried this, and say, okay, let's do it again. It was getting heavy. And we were talking, and he said, I said to Scott, I said, before you got into theater, television, film, did you have it? Yeah. Time. 5.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Did you have any? Were you working? What kind of a job did you work on before you got into acting, theater, television, film? And he said, "Well, I was an electrician." And what about you, John? Oh, I was a curb and gutter person for concrete. Thank you. And we laughed and we went out there. Okay. Next question. Come on, we got 4.5 minutes now. Come on.
We got a 15-minute transition. You wrap this up any way you want to. I'll let you go over.
Wrap it up.
We'll just until tomorrow or until later or until
All right.
tonight.
Wrap it up. What am I going to wrap it up with? I mean, Bob and I stand backstage when we're about to come out on stage and be Gowron and Martok before you, and we basically look at each other and say, okay, what are we going to talk about? What do we got? And I say, nothing. He said, okay, we're ready.
Now, John Paladin does your makeup.
Yeah.
When you do those.
Yeah.
And what a remarkable guy he is. We worked with him on
Paladin, the guy who does our makeup for when we do these conventions and we're in makeup. We don't do it really anymore. We're going to do it in creation. I think that'll be the last time. But Paladin was a radio disc jockey. And he knows, besides having an encyclopedic knowledge of music in the 60s, 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, nothing in the 21st century. He's incredibly funny. Disc jockeys are funny people. And he's a very funny man. You know what? I'll wrap it up with a joke that has nothing to do with Star Trek or John Paladin. All right. It's an Irish joke. Are there any Irish people here? Just there's one. There's two. The people with white hair, like myself.
All
yes.
of us.
Mike,
All of
there
us.
is Kevin Keegan. What's your name, sir? First name? Lee.
That's a great
The
Irish
famous
name.
Irish name.
Of course it's
Lee McLee.
Absolutely.
And Ronald. Oh, that's pretty Irish. Yeah, that's
fair.
fairly Irish. So anyway, I'll just use your name, Lee. Lee was getting ready. He came home from work, and he said to his wife, he said, "Oh, by the way," he's getting ready to relax and take a nap, and he says, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, we're having my boss is coming over for dinner tonight." His wife says, "What? What? What do you mean? We don't have anything in the house to what?" He says, "Oh, and he's French." What? What am I going to, first of all, we don't have anything. Second of all, what are we going to cook for a French person? They don't, what do they eat? We don't know. What about snails? And she says, we don't have any. Oh, okay. I'll tell you what, Lee, go down to the market, take this basket, and get a basket full of snails. And we'll roast them up, and he'll be happy, and you'll get your advance in your job. And he says, all right, all right, Lee, all right, Mrs., I'll go down and get the snail. So he starts off with his basket, and he passes Tommy, or maybe it was Ronnie. Ronnie steps out on his porch. He says, oh, Lee, by the way, could you have a minute? Because I have a couple of questions I have to ask you about the gutter. He says, oh, all right. So he says, I think I have a little bit of time. All right. So he goes in, they talk. He says, would you have a beer, a short one, Lee? Oh, maybe just one. And they drink and they talk. And so, do you have time for one more, Lee? Well, maybe just another short one. All right. So they have a couple of beers, and then they go on to the next. I got to get down to the market. He says, all right. Takes his basket and heads on down. And then who was it over here? Kevin says, oh, Kevin, Lee, just the person I'm looking for. Lee, could you come in here? I got a couple of questions. It's about the politics of the town. And he says, all right. So he goes in and he says, oh, by the way, do you have time for a short one? Just a small beer. He says, all right, maybe a short one.
Will you try?
This could go on for an hour and a half. But, so anyway, he's pretty drunk by the time he gets to the market. He gets 3 dozen snails in his basket, and he starts back. And it's a long walk back to keeping the snail. And he finally gets to his fence, and he opens up the gate to his fence. And the first step he takes on the flagstone leading up to his house is raised a little bit, catches his foot, falls on his face, The snails go everywhere in front of him, just as his wife comes out of the door, and she says, "Oh my goodness, what?" And before she can say anything, Lee looks at her, looks down at the snails, and says, "Come on, lads, just a few more feet." And that's it.
J.G. Hertzler. All right, our resident artist in residence is in the back. She's been making sketches and drawings throughout the weekend. They are available for sale if you guys are interested. Yep. There are a bunch.
And then, no, I'll pay you, and I want to pay you for a copy. I want to get some copies of it, so I'll buy a little bit of a copy.
A bunch of them. All right, we got David Gerald coming up next. So. for, well, more years than probably both of us want to admit to. But I've had the most amount of fun working with him over the last couple of years up in Ticonderoga on the Star Trek New Voyages sound stages. And it's been a lot of fun. One of the funniest guys, you know, if you just want to sit down and talk with him, he's fantastic. I want to remind, if you have questions, I'm just going to turn the panel over to him and let him kind of tell you his stories and stuff, which he has many, many great ones. But if you have questions, please step up to this mic so we can be picked up by our cameras that are recording. But ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Mr. David Gerald.
Thank you. Oh, good, it's on. Excuse me, if I start yawning, excuse me. I didn't sleep too good for a while last night. And, you know, they tell me that it's not a good idea for me to sleep during a panel, especially if I'm on it. So, let's see, bring you up to speed. My son got married in December, and they went to London. They paid for it themselves. They paid for the honeymoon themselves. I'm thrilled. She's a wonderful young lady. So that's The Martian Child. Did anybody here actually see the movie, The Martian Child? Thank you. How many read the book? Good. I think we have one copy of the book on the dealer's table, so whoever gets there first gets it. But he's married. He's 32 now. He's doing very, very well. So that's the big news. Let's see. I was in New York in February. I forget, because that's where I came down with a mild case of death. There were 2 conventions back to back, and somebody came to one of those conventions with delivering the con crud to just about everybody who was there. So I was down for a month. But while I was in New York, I turned in the rough drafts of books 5 and 6 for The War Against the Tord. Not just, you know, so book 5 will be A Nest for Nightmares, and book 6 will be A Method for Madness. And I'm editing those now. I'm also working on a disaster novel with a friend named Katine, who is really best known as one of the best photographers in the science fiction community. He wrote the definitive book on how to scan and restore your old Kodachromes, or your slides, or your whatever, your prints. And it's a big, thick book on how to get a good scan, and then how to pull it into Photoshop and break it down into layers and all of that. All that stuff I had to figure out the hard way, because I was doing it before he wrote the book. And but we're working on a disaster novel. You guys are safe here. There is, well, relatively. When the refugees arrive, however, that's something else. It turns out, anybody here ever been to Hawaii? The Big Island has this marvelous active volcano called Kilauea. Madame Pele, the goddess of the volcano, has been rumbling for hundreds of years, and there is an active flow of lava right into the sea. And this has been going on for centuries, because the island is still growing. And there's this enormous lava shelf that goes all the way down to the ocean. Well, it's held in place by this enormous lava bench under the water. And if that bench ever cracks and gives way, 500,000 cubic kilometers of lava slide into the ocean. And the numbers on this suggest that the entire Pacific Rim, everything from Australia to Japan and Hong Kong, the Aleutians, Canada, the west coast of the United States, Mexico, all the way down to South America, Chile, New Zealand, Australia, all the way around, will be hit by tidal waves and tsunamis, and in some places as much as 50 or 100 feet high. So we're working on that disaster novel. You get approximately 4 hours warning if you're in one of the targets, except Honolulu gets maybe 10 minutes warning. They're not going to make it. But the rest of the Pacific Rim, not even 10 minutes. I mean, it's just 30 minutes by air. It's just but the rest of the Pacific Rim gets about 4 hours of warning. So we're working on that. And then you're not safe. You know, if it turns out the safest place is somewhere in northern Texas, that'll be bizarre. Last year was a really good year. 2 years ago, I got to be guest of honor at the WorldCon and do the Hugo Awards ceremony. I actually asked the 2018 committee if I could host the Hugo Awards again so I could hand one out. We had 5 no awards that year. Last year, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction surprised me. They did a special tribute issue, and they put me on the cover, which they do not do that very often. They haven't done it in 10 years, and they've done it with people like Isaac Asimov and Fritz Leiber and Harlan Ellison. So I'm in pretty good company. This was really quite an honor. I was still blown away. But I just want to bring you up to speed on what I've been working on. I did a script, a sequel to The Trouble with Tribbles. We have scripts available for a fan film, and it's called Escape from the Planet of the Tribbles. Curious, Captain. These appear to be man-eating tribbles. Man-eating tribbles, Mr. Spock. How did you figure that out? It's obvious, Captain. They didn't eat the women. It's a very silly script, so. And we were going to have a lot of fun shooting it, but other things happened that got in the way. So it hasn't been shot yet, but someday we will do a fan film called Escape from the Planet of the Tribbles. And, of course, it has Klingons in it. And Mr. Scott does some nasty things to the Klingons again because that's his thing. And, then, let's see, what else have I got here? I read a story in FNSF that was a vampire story, and it was so brilliant it went on and won a Nebula a couple years ago. And I started thinking about vampires again. And I thought, what if vampirism is a medical condition, not supernatural? And how would that play out? And, you know, it's kind of like various diseases. You need a daykeeper to who takes out the trash, brings in the mail, does the shopping, and cleans the house during the day. You know, imagine a vampire. Okay, it's time to mop the floor. No, you're hungry. So I've got to go find a victim. And I was thinking about other things. If you have this prolonged lifespan, please. No. If you have this prolonged lifespan, it's traditional that when I'm on a panel, the phone rings. Usually it's my son. Hello, Sean. No, I'm not doing anything important. Now, I have an agreement with Sean. I will always pick up the phone when he calls. So anyway, but I started thinking about if you have a prolonged lifespan, A, you're not going to sparkle, and B, you're not going to be interested in a 16-year-old girl unless you're some kind of pedophile. A vampire wants somebody he can talk to, somebody with some wisdom, insight, somebody who's got something interesting to say. So you don't get chosen because you're good looking or because the vampire has a lust. You get chosen because the vampire thinks you'd be an interesting person to spend a couple hundred years with. So I wrote a story called Monsieur for FNSF in which a young writer is trying to write a vampire story, and when his writers group breaks up, this real vampire shows up and says, you guys keep getting it all wrong. Let me tell you how it happened. And so that turned into this novel, Jacob, which is just a lot of fun about how you take care and feeding of your vampire. So because Jacob starts out as a daykeeper for a vampire who he just calls Monsieur. Why is this beeping? Shut up. New phone. And then also coming from a story in FNSF, I think this is one of the best things I've ever written. It is not for children or small animals. It's just a very mature adult book. It's about a gay disabled Vietnam vet and some of the horrors and adventures he goes through. And then the last one I'm going to plug, because this is the commercial, I'm starting off as the commercial, is I collected all my horror stories. You'll notice it's a very thin book. I don't do horror stories very often, but it includes 1, 2, 3, 4. It includes The Night Train to Paris, which won the Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in Short Fiction, which is the horror equivalent of the Hugo. And they surprised me because I get this phone call and they say, we just want to check that Night Train to... I had been to a convention in Italy, and we had a great time. Who's here been to Italy? Yeah. And you came back? Yeah, me too. I wasn't going to come back. But I wanted to go to the south of France, but it turns out that there's no train from Milan to the south of France. So I had to take the night train to Paris. And it was such an interesting, weird experience that by the time I got to Paris, I had a story idea about people mysteriously disappearing from this train and why. And I wrote it up, and I finished it in Paris. Or no, I finished it when I got to London. And I had the last line all planned out, and I got there and typed something else entirely, which was twice as scary, right? So I sent it off to FNSF, and by the time I got back to LA, there was a check waiting for me in the mailbox, and I forgot about it. They published it. I'm happy, right? And then I get this phone call, like a year later. We just want to check that your story has not been was published in such and such a year. I say, okay, fine, yeah. Why? He says, well, it's going to be on the Bram Stoker Awards ballot. I said, great, that's nice. I'm not sarcastic, great. Is it great? Okay. So, and I'm thinking, well, I've never been nominated for a horror award. I'm not going to win. There's so many better horror writers in the world. But I have friends in Portland, so I went up for the banquet. And by then I had read all the other stories on the ballot, and I said, yeah, somebody else is going to take home the trophy. So I'm sitting there between Ellen Kushner, who is a great editor. Some of you, who's bought books that she's, oh, come on, I know you have. And on the other side is John Shirley, who's an old friend too. And so then when they get to that category, I'm not even paying attention anymore. I'm trying to guess who's going to win, and it's not going to be me, right? And they call my name. And I got up there, and I go, I said, I didn't prepare a speech. I read everybody else's stories. So anyway, that story is in here, and it got some nice reviews. So anyway, that's all the stuff I've been working on. So I'm working on editing The War Against the Tor, and I'm working on the disaster novel. And I'm working with a producer who loves all the scripts I've written, and we're looking for money to do. I wrote a play a couple years ago called Uncle Daddy Will Not Be Invited. And he read the script and says, this would make a great movie. Yeah, I think so. I'm biased. And so then the other producer says, no, let's take it to Broadway first. So they're looking for backers right now. But so that's nothing may ever happen. 90% of these never get anywhere, but these guys know what they're doing. So I'm hopeful. So who has questions? What do you guys want to hear about? Oh, come on.
Ladies and gentlemen,
right,
if you have questions, please
Yeah,
proceed to
right
the
there.
mic that is
There's a
in the
mic
middle.
right there if you.
I understand, but if you're loud, the people on the internet still won't be able to hear you.
There are people on the internet watching this? Oh, shit. All right, hi.
I
what's up?
remember a long time ago, I saw you at Volcon in New Orleans and alongside
Boy, that
Nichelle
was a long
Nichols
time
a
ago,
long
yeah.
time ago. And I just remember your book, The Man Who Folded Himself.
Yeah, thank you. Man Who Folded
And
Himself.
I love the
is-
ending. I'm going to put on the belt.
Yeah, The Man Who Folded Himself is about terminal adolescence evolving into taking responsibility for all of the choices you have in life. Of course, I didn't realize that when I wrote it. I was just saying, if I had a time belt, what would I do? And the story just kind of wrote itself. But the book has been in print for 40 years. It was first published in 1973. Well, 44 years now. And in fact, I got a nice I won't say fat, but it was a comfortable royalty check for the ebook sales just last week. So I'm kind of amazed that the book has become is considered a classic. I just write these stories thinking, this isn't as good as I really wanted it to be, but I don't know how to make it any better, so I have to just walk away and let it publish it. You know, it's like, I'll give you an example. Trouble with Tribbles was on the air almost 50 years ago, 49 and a half years, right? And Bob Englund, an old friend, you may remember Freddy Krueger, and he was at my house. We watched it. We had a little party, and he got very, very effusive in his praise about how good it was. And I knew it had turned out very well, but I said, come on, Bob, it's only one episode of one TV series. In 20 years, who's going to remember it? And here it is 49 and a half years later. So I am not very good at predicting the future. And so the same thing with Man Who Folded Himself, which got a Hugo and a Nebula nomination. I thought, well, that's nice, but you know the way this, who remembers what got nominated 2 years ago? Who even reads, you know, because so many good books are coming out, nobody keeps up, and yet here I'm finding out that there is a continuing option on the movie rights for The Man Who Folded Himself. I don't know when they're going to get off their butts and make the movie, but they've invested a lot just renewing the option. And then there's the book just keeps selling and selling. So I'm working with someone. We've picked out an artist, and we're going to do a graphic novel based on The Man Who Folded Himself sometime next year or later this year. I don't know. I'm old. I'm cranky. Who else? Yes, use the mic, please. There's a microphone. Yeah, otherwise the people on the internet will wonder who I'm talking to. People on the internet. Hi, internet.
I love time travel stories, so my immediate thought was the same thing you came up with. You know, if I've got a way to time travel, I'm going to go check the lotto numbers, or in your case, the racetrack.
Yeah, now it would be the lotto numbers.
Yeah, exactly. But right back then, it was the racetrack.
Back then, you're in L.A., your only place to bet would be to go down to Inglewood to the racetrack, or out to Santa Anita to the racetrack, which is, I think, Huntington Park. I don't go to the races. I've never been. I've been in Tijuana. I went to the dog races once. You know how you know who's going to win the Greyhound race? It's the one who poops before the race starts. So, anyway, thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking I should rewrite The Man Who Folded Himself, but why bother? It's earning money. So, but because I look at it now and I say, gee, I could do so much better. And also with 44 years of experience, I have a long list of people who are never going to be born. So I was thinking, I don't want to be a murderer, but I could hand condoms or morning after pills out to a few parents. Yeah, The Man Who Origami, yes. That's a good title, too, yeah. So who else? Oh, come on. This is your convention. I'm here to, when they say guest of honor, it really means I'm here to honor you, because without you guys, the fans and the audience and the readers, who's going to pay my mortgage, right? So I'm here to honor your enthusiasm and passion. So you've got to have questions about science fiction or writing. Yes, sir, please.
Well, back in the day, also I read when Harley was one. How has that been doing?
When Harley Was One is I thought that was my best novel. I thought it was better than The Man Who Folded Himself, and it's kind of been surpassed by history in terms of the technology. So nobody's going to read it as a prediction of what's going on. But it was never about the technology. It was about I'd seen. No, where it came from is I had been playing with computers at MIT, and when you play with Eliza, it's like, all right, there's somebody hiding in that box, right, in that cabinet.
I actually had a chance to use Eliza when I was a kid at the time in the 60s, and it was a friend of my brother's who worked at Digital.
Yeah.
And he had a hard copy terminal in his guitar.
Yeah.
And his name is Matt. So the direct connection. And that was one of the things they showed me.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. But anyway, there was this thing going on in the 60s where some writers were saying, well, marijuana increases my productivity. LSD increases my productivity. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to mess around with my brain chemistry. So I wrote Oracle for a White Rabbit, in which a guy sits down with the computer, and the computer has been tripping out. And he says, well, your purpose, Harley, is to think logically. And the computer says, well, if that's my purpose, what's yours? That was the punchline. And I sold it was my first sale to Galaxy. And then I kept thinking about Harley and started writing a series of stories, which Galaxy published, which really were a series of conversations about if you invent an intelligence engine. I don't call it artificial intelligence because we don't know what intelligence is. We don't even know what real intelligence is, so how can we talk about artificial? So if you build an intelligence engine, it's not going to know everything up front. It has to learn. This was my one big insight. And somebody's going to have to teach it, and somebody's going to have to talk to it and teach it ethics and relationships and all of that. And so that's what the novel is about. Here's the joke. I studied script writing with one of the best instructors in the world, a fellow named Erwin R. Blacker, and he talks about structure, 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 and structure. And he goes on. I mean, he was great, just a brilliant, brilliant man. And also he knew what he was talking about because he had written a lot of books and a lot of scripts. So I thought that I was very good at story structure because he gave me the only A he ever handed out. He says, you understand structure. I said, great. I thought my weakest was characterization, so I had to work real hard to make characters come to life. Well, it turns out that my weakness is structure and my strength is character. Anyway, so because when you look at When Harley Was Won, that's very vivid characterization, same things with The Man Who Folded Himself. And by the time you get to the war against the Tor, I get letters from people saying, if you kill off Elizabeth Torelli, I'm coming after you. So, I mean, it's like, she's fictitious. She's fictitious. The whole point of fiction is to be able to kill people without going to jail. Why do you think George R.R. Martin does it? He's an evil man. So, yeah, all right. Anyway, people ask me what I do for a living. I don't like to say I write, but so I say, well, 90% of what I do is research, which is true, and 10% is planning revenge. Because that's what writers do, is the end of the book is always about somebody is getting even with somebody else. Well, if we don't justify that, he's an evil person. So we spend 90% of the book having the villain doing, or the TV show, but especially the movie, having the villain do all kinds of dreadful things or planning to do dreadful things so that when the hero does something even more dreadful, we cheer, which really does not speak well for us as a species. There's been like maybe 3 movies that aren't about revenge. The only one I can think of offhand is Close Encounters, which is about rapture. Very difficult to do a movie in which someone isn't getting even with someone. I think even Castaway is man against nature. So, any other questions? You know, just line up here, or I'll make stuff up. Yes.
What is your daily writing routine, your work day like?
Oh, that's a great question. What is my daily writing routine? Well, after I finish crying. No, seriously. I do, every project invents its own discipline. But every so often I get curious. So for 1 year, I kept a spreadsheet of how effective I was. And my target per day was 1,000 words per day. And I ended up doing 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words a day, sometimes like 12 days straight, which is a whole novel. When I was living in Manhattan back in the 70s, every night I would plan the next day's chapter while I would be laying in bed waiting to fall asleep, and I'd work out the next day's chapter. And I'd fall asleep, and I'd get up in the morning. Sometimes I wouldn't even bother to put on clothes, and I'd sit and type the whole chapter, and I would not and this was on a typewriter with paper, and I would not go out and get anything to eat or go anywhere until I had finished that chapter, and then I was done for the day, and I could do whatever I wanted, which, you know, go to a movie, take the dog to the park. Sometimes I would take the dog over to Washington Square Park. We'd come back, then I'd write. But then, you know, and then I'd take him once again in the afternoon, and then I could, you know, go out and hang out with friends or whatever. So that was in the 70s. Now, then when I had a word processor attached to my IBM Selectric typewriter, I had a roll of butcher paper up the back, and I would just type forever. But more recently, this past couple years, I had the spreadsheet that I was filling out. Then another time, somebody suggested, well, chart what are your most productive hours? So I created another spreadsheet that broke down the day into hours, and I charted which hours were my most productive over a period of 4 months or so. And it turns out my most productive hours are between 11 and 1, at noon and midnight. So around 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. are my most productive times. So, you know, if I go take a nap at 4 in the afternoon, I don't have to feel guilty, because I'll get some work done midday or midnight or both. And but that was then. Now it's like middle of the day. I'll be writing, and then around dinner time, I'll write some more until my favorite shows have been recorded. And if there's no favorite show, a movie, because I'm good for an hour, maybe 2 hours of TV at most per night. And what happens is, if something awful is going to happen on the TV and I don't want to watch it because I don't like watching terrible things, I pause the goddamn thing and then go and write some more and then come back. So I'll write in 15-minute spurts. So every project creates itself differently. A Rage for Revenge, I had a great idea for a scene. I had a dream about a school bus, and that's a great scene. So I wrote the scene, and then I wrote the scene that came before it. Then I wrote the scene that came before that. And I did that with 2 separate sections of the book, writing them backwards from a scene, backward, until I connected to backward. And it was very weird that I wrote that book backwards, but nobody can tell it plays. So I was like, how did that happen? And I've never done that again. So everything invents its own process. And there was some guy was doing a Doctor Who comic book or graphic novel or something, and every writer was going to do a different Doctor. And I lucked out. I got David Tennant. And I said, I'm going to do the mashup where he arrives on the Enterprise. And he starts nagging me. Where is it? And like the night before the deadline, say, hang on. And I sat down, because I hadn't quite come up with it, and I dashed off a script for like a 12 pages, 20 pages, whatever. I gave him 12 pages. He says, I needed 20. I said, all right, hang on. An hour later, he says, I'm not going to read this. I said, what do you mean you're not going to read it? He says, I said, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to use it. How good could it be if you did it in an hour? I said, you have no idea how writing works. Sometimes it's like getting the cork out of the bottle and everything, or turning on the fire hose or whatever, and all just flows like crazy. And that's what happened here. So I said, no, how good could it be if you wrote it in only an hour? What is this crap with the blood, sweat, and tears? If I wanted blood, sweat, and tears, I'd go argue with my son, who is really good at arguing. So, not so much anymore. But I said, you don't understand. He was, well, I'm the editor. I said, well, not a very good one. So he rejected it. And Steve Davidson at Amazing says, I'll take it immediately. I just put a note on Facebook. I said, well, I have this thing that I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And he says, I'll take it. And we don't have any copies of it for sale anymore. And I'll tell you, it's what is it? I forget what it is. Doctor on the Enterprise, whatever it was. It was a one-off. And the project was cursed from the beginning. I should have known it, because anything that had to be put in FedEx to be emailed to somebody else, like the artwork, would get lost. Anything, and the artist had problems. So we were like a year and a half late before the artwork was finished. And then anything that had to go back and forth And then there were problems with the printer and the colorist and everything. And finally, we finally got some copies, and Steve says, I can't sell these for enough even to break even. I give up. So we sold them at a few conventions. I have maybe one copy left on my shelf for my files. And I thought, this project had to have been cursed. But it was funny because here's the TARDIS appears on the transporter rooms. Who are you? I'm the doctor. Bones goes, I'm the doctor. No, I'm the doctor. I'm not a doctor. Wait a minute. I am the doctor. No, but it was a really funny mashup because the doctor is arriving in the middle of the Tribble episode. And, you know, the TARDIS only arrives where the doctor is needed. So I think I forget what happened, but it involves the Klingons. But then the punchline was that the whole thing is a dream by Dr. Sheldon Cooper. And he wakes up, Bazinga! So maybe I don't know what I'm going to do with that. Maybe I'll find a place to publish it again. So who else has questions?
I was going to mention, I was listening to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me today, and they were talking about like the origin of the idea, when an idea pops into your head of a story, and they said like, you know, the Bible starts in the beginning, or Tom woke up and went for a walk in the park, and then they inserted the sentence, and then the murders began.
Yeah. And then and then the murders began. Yes. Well, with the collapse of the shelf novel, there was a case that happened a few years ago where somebody tied a bunch of helium balloons to a lawn chair and ended up in the path of the oncoming jets because he went like 3 miles high, right? And so we in the planning we have a young reporter who is visiting Comic-Con. This guy is well tethered, cluster ballooning, and she goes up only a little ways, and she's got this great camera because she's a reporter, and she's taking pictures of San Diego. And the punchline is, and those were the last pictures of San Diego before the waves hit. So yeah, it's like, and then the murders began. So there's writers love to play the game of a great opening line. Is the classic one is a great opening line should have royalty, sex, and a hint of violence. So the great opening line is and a little profanity. God damn it, said the Queen, take your hand off my leg. So, yeah, who else? Come on. There must be things you're curious about. Anyone on the internet, email me. Facebook.
2 years ago at Dragon Con, Wesley Ure and Kathy Coleman were there, and they were talking about a potential sequel to Land of the Lost. And I was wondering if that's still in the works, or?
Well, sequel to The Land of the Lost. Marty, what is his last name? Croft. Marty Croft. Sid and Marty called me in for a meeting. It's already 2 years ago, 3 years. And Marty says, David, you're the only one who knows Land of the Lost well enough. If you want to do a sequel, we'd love to, because we hated the movie with, what's his name? And we'd love to do a sequel, but we need a novel to base it on. So I said, all right, fine. So I have permission, and I worked it out, and I told Wesley about this, is that Will and Holly had a younger brother. He was too young to go on the trip. So he grew up and became a geologist, and he has 2 daughters. And they, plus several other scientists, in a well-equipped expedition, are going into the Superstition Mountains or wherever, and there's this geographic anomaly, and they're going to investigate it because this is where his older brother and sister and father disappeared. And, of course, they end up in the Land of the Lost. And so Wesley and Kathy would be part of that. I said, if we get it going, Wesley will have turned into this kind of deranged Tarzan kind of character, and Holly will have evolved into some kind of spiritual presence. And they both love that idea. I just haven't had a chance to get down to writing it. I've got about 20,000 words written. I now have to finish it. But what happened is I wrote a bunch, and I gave it to my agent, And he looked at it and he says, well, I can't decide if this is a young adult novel or a science fiction novel, and adult novel. And I said, well, which one's going to sell better? So it's going to be a young adult novel, but that meant I had to go back and do some editing. So, and I do want to get back to it. So I had a friend say, well, I'll collaborate on it with you. And I said, well, here's what I need to do. And I told him, because I know The Land of Lost. I said, I want to do this and this. And then he comes back with an outline that was like nothing like what I wanted to do. It's like, weren't you listening? So I have to write it myself. I'm not going to trust anyone else. There were people, when I was story editing the show, I was very lucky. I had so many great writers to work with that I could say, here's this kind of a story that I would like to do, but I'm not sure how to work it out. And then Dick Morgan goes off and comes back with a perfect story, perfect script. Dorothy Fontana's another one. Norman Spinrad, Ben Bova. You'll notice I was hiring some really good writers. I don't know how a lot of other TV shows are being done today, but I know that the lesson I learned from Gene Roddenberry and from Star Trek is hire the very best, most experienced writers with the best experience in the genre to do the work, because they're the ones who know not to make the stupid mistakes that will do tech talk in the last 5 minutes, and that'll solve the problem. And we'll bring in the 15-year-old super genius, and he'll do the tech talk, and that'll solve. No, that's not accurate. Your 15-year-old super genius does not have the emotional maturity. When I'm 15, I don't know how to change a tire, and you want me to save the Enterprise? Give me a break. So, yeah, anyway. But, yeah, it was so The Land of Lost, The Return, I know I just have to finish writing it. I know what I want to do. It'll be fun. There's a lot of in-jokes in there, too. So, well, thank you. Thank you. You had, yes.
Speaking of bringing on good writers for a television show, can you talk about how you came to write an episode of Babylon 5?
Yeah, Joe Straczynski picked up the phone and called me and said, David, would you like to do an episode of Babylon 5? I said, yeah. He says, come on up to Harlan's house tonight, and because Harlan was creative consultant. And so I go up, and I hadn't even read the Bible. I didn't know what Babylon 5 was. So they're explaining it to me, and because it was the first season, and nothing had been aired. And they're explaining it to me, and I said, all right. And they say, here's the story we think you should write. So, oh, good. This'll be, no, this is fine. This will save me a lot of trouble. They'll give me a premise, and I'll go to town with it. And they said, the alien family won't let the doctor operate on their kid. Oh, God, no. I don't want to write that story. Are you kidding me? Star Trek did that. They saved the kid. Little House on the Prairie did that. They saved the kid. Diagnosis Murder did that. They saved the kid. All in the Family did. I said, everybody does that story. It's a Christian Scientist and the Jehovah's Witnesses and the... no. And they're saying, David, you've got to do this story. We really want... I says, everybody saves it. Let me kill the kid. And what did I say? Well, you kill people without going to jail, right? I said, you know what? It's all these people are doing this crap, and nobody ever asks the kid. They're playing games with the kid's life, and once in a while that kid is going to die because everybody's being so stupid. And they looked at each other, and they looked at me and said, okay, it's a deal. Go write it. So now, I probably should have held that script back and one more rewrite, but it turned out pretty good. All the scenes with the aliens worked out fine. Oh, there's a joke on that I got to share. There's a line in there where one of the aliens says to the parents, go to all the different aliens on Babylon 5. I don't even remember what they called them. They go to the these and the those and the that. And then when they reach the that, he says, it is too late for the pebbles to vote. The avalanche has already started. And this has been quoted a lot. And I thought, and I was very proud of that line. It's a really nice line. Last year or 2 years ago, there was this kerfuffle about the Hugo Awards. And I was saying that I really felt that the slate mongering was a mistake. And one of the people on the other side of the argument says, well, it's too late for the Pebbles to vote. The avalanche has already started. And I said, oh, that is such a great line. You really should quote where it's from. It's from Babylon 5. It's from the Believers episode. And you really should acknowledge who wrote it. I did. That person disappeared from that entire comment thread immediately. I've never heard of him since. I think he evaporated. Oh, the humanity! I'm melting. So anyway, but the key scene is when the parents realize that they're not going to get their son is going to die from overbloated whatever. And the doctor wants to operate, and they're saying, no, we're not going to let him operate. And the key scene is when the parents go and say goodbye to their son. And I'm writing this at like 3 in the morning. Sean is safely asleep. I had just adopted Sean a few months before. And I get this chill up my spine. And I have to go to the other side of the house and double check that he's all right. He's fine. You know, you'd look in on your kids. They look so sweet and so innocent. You're standing there with the pillow in both hands. You say, all right, one more day. By the time you're ready, they're teenagers are big enough to fight back. But right then, and then the problem is disposing of the body, too. But anyway, but I got this chill up. Sean was all right. Okay, then I went back and I realized I pick up the phone. It's 3 in the morning. I called Joe Straczynski. Now I know why you wanted me to write this thing, you son of a bitch. Because I was the only writer they knew who had a kid. Not a lot of writers at that time were parents. We were all terrified of them. Harlan used to say, David Gerald is the most courageous man I know. I said, why are you saying this? He says, you adopted a kid. So I said, oh, you've met him. So, yeah, and he has. So anyway, the episode turned out very, very nice, and I was very proud of it. And but the joke is, in that scene where the parents are saying goodbye to the kid, there's 4 lines of dialogue where the parents are saying, when you were hatched, we had the choice between keeping you or having a feast. But there wasn't enough of you to go around. You were so small, so we decided to keep you. And, they're aliens, right? I got a call from Joe. He says, the script is terrific, but these 4 lines, they say, you can take them out. I only put them in so you could take them out. It was a test to see how much I could get away with. If he'd have left them in, it would have been fine, too. It was still, the parents were still saying goodbye to their kid, so. Anyway, but thank you for remembering the Believers episode. That one line of dialogue, of course, has been quoted a lot of places. It's one of those, ends up in the great quotes of science fiction. That one always ends up that, and a tribble is the only love money can buy. Too much of anything is not, even love is not always a good thing, Lieutenant. Get these things off my ship. So, we went back and we did the sequel to the Tribbles for the animated show, and the gag was this Tribble in the captain's chair just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So, we have time for one last question. No time for an answer, but one time for...
You actually have 15 minutes.
Oh, really? Somebody gave me a 5-minute...
She was mistaken. She thought you ended at 2:30. It's 2:30 now.
Oh, okay. All right, we have time for a lot more questions if anyone wants to ask one.
Probably going to embarrass myself and misremember, but did you write the story with a finger in my eye?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was right.
Thank you. Yeah.
I just loved these. How did that pop into your head?
Oh, now that's funny. I had a weird little dream that I looked in a mirror and the pupil was gone from my left eye. And I was still in school. And I sat down and typed up like a page and a half, which is the first page of the story. And I didn't know where that was going, and I just kept it and left it in the, you have your files. And that was would have been about 65 or 66. And then a few years later, Harlan Ellison is doing, again, Dangerous Visions. I submit a story. He rejected it, made fun of it in the introduction. I published it in a short story collection. It got a Nebula nomination. Harlan came back later and said, maybe I should have published your story. Anyway, but I took that, I was looking through my files, and I found that first page, and I just got silly and started typing to see where it would go. And it was just about the fact that language, we're creatures of language. We live inside our language, and it determines our reality. And I said, what if it actually determined objective reality as well as subjective reality? I did not have that as a conscious thought. It was just a kind of the subtext. I just, well, let's see where the language goes with this. And it got silly. It's a very silly story, but it has a kind of a weird, surreal. I really wanted to write hard science fiction, but I couldn't come up with any ideas at the time. Now, a hard science fiction is like, man, there's so many great things you can do with science, but there's so much science you can't keep up. So it is very hard to be a hard science fiction writer, but to be one and say, well, let's go to an alien planet. I mean, this is why the war against the Tor is taking so long, is of all the sciences, the life is messy everywhere. Science is the worst. It's just sloppy. And the more you look at the David Attenborough Planet Earth and Planet Earth 2 and all of the, the frozen planet and all the different things that just on our own ecology here on this planet, you realize, and how everything is interrelated. Everything from the microscopic level all the way to the macroscopic level, the interaction of, for instance, elephants will when they get to a water hole, they'll dig and they'll deepen it. And this makes water holes available to other animals. So elephants are necessary to the health of the entire ecology, right? They make it possible for the other herds to survive. And when you realize this is one little factor, and when you look at all of the, you have the seasonal and the weather and the climate and the migration and the this and the locust and the that, and you put it all together and you go, how does anybody understand ecology? We're only a small piece of it. How are we supposed to understand how this thing works? Which has been the biggest problem with the war against the Tor, is the more different, every time I invent a new critter, it has to fit in, and it has to interact with and have an effect on everything else. So finally I just gave up and said, fuck, I'll write the story. So yeah, somebody else has a question? Anyone? Yes?
I have to lower this. I don't have a question, David. I just wanted to tell you personally, thank you for Trouble with Tribbles.
Oh, thank you.
Because, and I think I did tell you this at one point, as a little 9-year-old kid when that came on, I was miserable, okay? I had had a rough couple of years. And I was a Star Trek fan because my dad was an oceanographer. And he said, when Star Trek came on in the first episode, he said, there's a science show on that I want you to see.
How
And
nice
somehow he had gotten this in his idea that this was a science show. And I mean, it was on past my bedtime, so it was a big deal to be allowed to stay up to see this because I was in 3rd grade. Imagine that, right? So I was a Star Trek fan, and that was the only show I was allowed to stay up to see. And we got to Trouble with Tribbles, and I was in Milford, Connecticut, and my initials are L.O., and the elementary school's initials were also L.O.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So you can imagine what it was like. Also, I was smarter than my 3rd grade teacher, so that was kind of rough, too.
Yeah, I've had that experience, too.
I was miserable, and then Trouble with Tribbles came on, and you know that I spent months laughing about that show. It was a gift for me to be able to see something that made me feel happy. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm glad that, yeah. Charlie Finley, the editor of FNSF, when he said, we're going to do this tribute issue, and so I want to interview you for the tribute issue, and I said, okay, yeah, I'm cool with it. Hey, you're giving me a Lifetime Achievement Award, putting me on the cover of the magazine, yeah. So, and of course, the Tribbles are there. So he says, we have copies in the dealer's room. Anyway, so we have copies of everything in the dealer's room. So he asks me, what do you think your legacy will be? I said, that's already been decided. I could cure cancer tomorrow, and my legacy will be, we know what's going on my tombstone. The guy who wrote The Trouble with Tribbles also cured cancer, right? we know. Guy Raymond, who played the bartender, the trader, he was a song and dance man with a very storied career in the entertainment industry. When he died, the LA Times gave him, his obituary was 2/3 of a page, and half of the obituary was The Trouble with Tribbles. And I was furious. I mean, as flattered as I was that they talked about the Tribbles, I was furious that they ignored so much of his other career, you know. And I'm always grateful that I got to start at the top. So most people have to start at the bottom, work their way up the ladder. No, I think I'm lazy. I think I'll start up here at the top, right? I started with Star Trek, and I started selling novels to Ballantine Books and getting Hugo and Nebula nominations right and left. And I said, oh, yeah, I like this. This is cool. It's a lot easier. But I did have to learn how to write first, you know. I had to learn. And I mean, before I was selling novels, I had to practice. Oh, man, I really broke my back learning how to do a prose fiction. It is not easy. And, but, you know, I'd like the readers, the fans, to know, oh, here's The Martian Child, here's The War Against the Tor, here's The Star Wolf, here's The Din Gilead, my young adult Heinlein-esque juveniles, here's my, here's my other stuff, and here's some of the stuff where I'm really starting to really stretch. You know, this one, 13, 14, 15 o'clock. This is the kind of level of writing I wish I'd been able to do 50 years ago in the 70s when I first started. But this was what I aspired to be able to do, but didn't know how. And that's the great joke in life. About the time you become good at anything, you die. And you look at, I mean, I'm afraid to open Locus. I mean, the obituary section is more depressing every month. One year I'm going to open it up, my name will be there. I was like, that's depressing. So, but the thing is if you look, you can if you read a writer's work chronologically, you can see the growth process. And Daniel Keyes Moran, who's a brilliant, brilliant writer, he says a lot of writers, you can see where they hit their peak or they plateau. And he said to me, he says, you haven't done it yet. You're one of the few guys who just keeps challenging yourself year after year. I said, well, yeah, because that's the way I was trained, is that you take on the challenge. What's the next thing you don't know how to do? Learn how to do that. And so I want to be the best writer I can, and every time I finish something, I say, no, I think I can do better next time out. So what's the next challenge? So, and I hardly ever admit that in public because it sounds arrogant. But thank you, Leslie. That's really nice. So anybody else? Any more questions? Yeah, right. How do you follow that one? Come on, give me an easy question. Like, where do babies come from? We're working on that. I have a theory. Whoever got me this glass of water, don't get it from this place ever again. It has a metallic taste. Yeah.
Where did the idea of the tribbles themselves come from and the
great
name?
Question. Rabbits in Australia. I was started being interested in ecology before the word ecology had been invented. And I'd heard about rabbits in Australia and seen pictures, and I think even a newsreel ones, with rabbits piled up to here. And so my theory when I started pitching to Star Trek is, please don't do the scary alien of the week, because that's what, they did Monster of the Week on Voyage to the Bottom of the ratings. And, and I mean, sometimes you're going to run to an alien who is so cute that you're not going to recognize it's dangerous. And so one of mine was an empathic teddy bear who was, which I eventually did as a manga for Tokyo Pop. But I thought, rabbits in Australia, you don't realize, one bunny is cute, right? 5,000 bunnies and you have a problem. This is a horde of locusts. And they've just ate your winter crop. You're going to starve to death, right? But I thought, well, we're not going to use living creatures of any kind. that's just messy and troublesome and expensive. And I thought, well, and Holly Sherman, who is this other theater arts student, she and I were best buddies, and she had a little keychain with a fluff ball on it like that. And I looked at it and said, you know, that could be my critter. So I turned in an outline called A Fuzzy Thing Happened. The research department said, well, there's a book by Piper, H. Beam Piper, called Little Fuzzy, so maybe you might want to avoid that conflict and name your creature something else. So I made a list of the silliest words I could think of, crossed off all the words that were too silly, and walked in to Gene Elkoon's office and said, we could call the creatures Tribbles. And then we'll title the episode The Trouble with Tribbles. And he said, okay. And that was it. There was no big, long meeting about what we were going to do. It was like, who knew? You know, we were creating this iconic thing, this iconic part of an iconic show. Who knew? But Tribbles have been a part of almost every Star Trek movie and part of Deep Space Nine, and they showed up in, I guess it was Voyager. And there's been comic books, and they've been part of graphic novels. Nobody ever picks up the phone and says, David, here's the Tribble story we're going to tell. So I could say, no, Tribbles don't do that. And so there's been some stuff written about Tribbles that I look at. We were doing a fan film called Blood and Fire with Star Trek New Voyages, which was about Regulan bloodworms. And I was directing it. I had written the script, and I was directing it. And we had this, we had the set, the bridge set of the Copernicus, which has been destroyed by bloodworms. And I was directing one of the actors. I said, now look, the bloodworms have done, and so when you come in, you're infected with bloodworms, and you're going to do your death scene. So you come in here, you shout your speech here, you fall down here, and say, all right. So from the back of the soundstage, it's very dark, comes this little voice, Mr. Gerald, that's not canon. Now, there must have been like 50 people getting ready for this shot, right? And the whole room went, boom, silent. And they're all looking to me. What's he going to do? I said, I invented the goddamn bloodworms. They'll do any damn thing I tell them to. I don't believe in this whole canon thing. It's like you do what the story demands and worry about. And you know why I'm justified? Because my experience with Gene Roddenberry is I said, look, Gene, we can fix this thing about star dates, and we can fix this thing about warp speed, and we can fix it. He says, David, allow me the consistency of my inconsistencies. Okay, Gene, it's your universe. It's your sandbox. I'm not going to argue anymore. So, anyway, yeah. Well, I don't even remember what the question was. It started that little. Oh yeah, it was about where the idea came from. So, good question. Thank you. So, any time left, or do I have to say good night? 2 minutes. Okay. One last quick question. Anyone? All right. Well, then I will end this way. I'm going to end it quickly because I got to go pee. That water is awful. Look. Thank you for having me be your guest of honor here at Treklanta. I got to tell you, I've been to Dragon Con in Atlanta, and I'm never going back. I don't deal well with crowds. I love the small conventions. I get to meet people. I get to chat with people. I get to actually find out who you are. You're not just this faceless mass. You're people. And I love the enthusiasm. And Bob Justman used to say, he's not with us anymore, so I'll say it for him, thank you. Because without the enthusiasm and the passion and the commitment of the fans, there would never have been a Star Trek phenomenon. There would never have been Next Gen. There would never have been 13 movies and a new TV series. There's never. You guys made it happen. And those of us who had the privilege of working on Star Trek, I will tell you this, we are honored not just by your enthusiasm and passion and commitment, but we are astonished and impressed and just absolutely delighted by how much you've invented. You show up in your costumes and props, and you build sets. We are you do your fan fiction. We are those of us who worked on the original series, and I think there's only 3 of us left, other than the cast. We sometimes we just look at each other and go, "Can you believe it?" And say, "Yeah." And that's you. So on behalf of all of us who worked on the original series, thank you very much for what you created, which is the Star Trek phenomenon. You've kept it going for 50 years. Thank you.